Welcome. We're live. Mike Crawford here. Starting off with a document right on the screen before we bring up the guest. Barrett Brown is an American journalist. He's broken a lot of stories. He's a National Magazine Award winner. He's an activist. He's been in federal prison. He's breaking so much news on his Twitter. I'm really excited to have him. I don't use the word hero that much anymore. I don't like leaders either, but this guy is kind of a leader and a hero to me, just for what he's done. So I'm going to bring him right up right now. Barrett Brown, welcome to the show. What's up, man?
Thank you very much for having me.
That was probably a quick. I could say so much about you, but I don't even want to try to stumble through your bio because it's pretty impressive and long. And there's so much information that I want you to share. Where do you want to start tonight? I think Glenn Greenwald and the Intercept, maybe something along that line. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what we're talking about tonight comes down to several different entities. It comes down to the CIA. It comes down to Peter Thiel and Pierre Omidyar, who are the billionaire national security enthusiasts who were probably responsible and arguably are the ones who put Trump in office, by many accounts. And Peter Thiel, in his own right, had an extensive role in shaping the alt-right and harnessing it and infiltrating things that might oppose him, his company Palantir, and so on and so forth. So those subjects, unfortunately, they overlap quite a bit, as with the FBI. They overlap with a lot of the things I've been involved in. They overlap with the things I went to prison for, the things that Aaron Schwartz was, some of the things he was researching along with us years ago, the things Michael Hastings was researching years ago, the things that Kevin Gallagher has been helping to put out up until his death last year. And I point this out because I want people to understand what the implications are, just very clearly, about the things I'm about to talk about. Because there's a lot of ways in which people who have perhaps had the wrong heroes, which I have, been fooled into working for something nefarious, which I certainly have, or have made mistakes, done things they shouldn't have done, like I have. They need to be willing to, at this point, do the right thing and participate in bringing these things to light, because it's shocking, and I'm hard to shock at this point. So I'll start by pointing out a few just different separate facts that will help us to kind of center on around what we're going for here. A few months ago, I participated in a panel discussion in Berlin, run by the Disruption Labs Network, and I did by remote, because I'm in the UK and with the Asylum. I have asylum seeking status. I have luckily a major London law firm, Asylum division, representing me on this. So I can't leave the UK. They have my passport. But anyway, so I participated, and so did Reality Winner. Reality Winner's mother, who had been, one of those who has had to step in and help to advocate, for us and for her daughter and all that. Very common among, the mothers or family members or friends of whistleblowers. Naomi Colvin, who has done a tremendous amount, probably more than any other person, to help get whistleblowers, to help them when they're being prosecuted or extradited. She based almost single-handedly. She played a huge role in Laurie Love, the UK whistleblower who the US has been trying to extradite, in him not getting extradited so far. She was, and she ran the Courage Foundation, which was a thing set up to help whistleblowers like myself, and just has done a tremendous amount and knows a tremendous amount about the inner workings of WikiLeaks, for instance, some of the things that happened with Assange and his circle during the election. All of us, and John Kiriakou also was speaking. John Kiriakou was a former long-term CIA agent who revealed the torture program and went to prison over it. During 2 days of this panel, with all of us, speaking, myself, Reality Winner, her mother, John Kiriakou, and I believe to some extent a few others, all said the same thing about a certain subject, and it was that the Intercept and First Look, which was funded by Pierre Omidyar and founded by Glenn Greenwald in conjunction with Laura Poitras, who is actually one of the few people here who's not a villain. The Intercept screwed them over. And there's some disagreements about why and to what extent, but there's no disagreements that they did and that they have not been accounted for it. And to go further, myself and John Kiriakou, both of whom have had extensive dealings with this community and with the intelligence community. I mean, him especially, since he's a former CIA guy. I was more of a target. And with the media, have been attesting for a while that the Intercept, that something has been wrong there. And the fact that all these whistleblowers that are proclaimed and looked towards as heroes and all that, and you see all the support for us over the years. The fact that we can all get together at a conference, that for a book release where we all have essays coming out, this big thing that's been prepared and all that, and none of this gets reported or spread, and just doesn't make an impact whatsoever. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I don't think it hurts John Kiriakou's feelings. And the victims of that silence, of that lack of attention, is not really us. I mean, it is to some extent. The victims are the public, and everything else I'm going to talk about tonight that may have happened to people around me, people who are being prosecuted right now, who are my longtime associates, people who were prosecuted in the past, people who have died, while being harassed or prosecuted. All of this is about the public. In every single case. The influence networks we're talking about, the individuals, they're not mad at Barrett Brown. They're not trying to send Barrett Brown to prison for 100 years, and then trying to do it again now because they don't like the cut of my jib, although they might not. This is all because the public is supposed to know certain things, and it needs to know certain things. And there are very powerful, very, very creative, very brilliant, and very resourceful elements, Peter Thiel being a chief example, who do not want those things out. And then beyond that, there's a network of people to various degrees of culpability who don't want to face the documented facts. Some have over the last year or so. And some have responded very badly. But the fact of the matter is, there's a huge amount about the last 10 years that has now come together, and because the horrible thing is, the thing that really it's a symptom aside from the disease, is how difficult it has been to get these things attention. Because again, there is not a single major press outlet in the U.S. that is not screwed up on this. There are several that have, to various degrees, facilitated it. The FBI is vastly culpable for some of the same things it was supposed to investigate and find out about, such as the election. And a lot of the people in the movement, in the people who have been the legal support networks, the lawyers that were provided to Jeremy Hammond, for instance, who wasn't my co-defendant, but we were both prosecuted for some of the same things, some of the same operations against Stratfor and Kingdom of Bahrain and so forth. There are people and people I brought in to the movement who are culpable for things in the past and are still active right now. And the FBI is involved, intelligence community is involved, private contractors are involved, individual FBI cooperators whose correspondence we have with their handlers, who we've known for years, we know everything about, are involved, and they're working with people and groups that I once believed in very much, and it's unfortunate, and it needs to get out. So that's what we're gonna do. Let me.
You know what? I just realized that for folks following online, I screwed up the screen, the title. It's Barrett Brown with 2 T's. I'm going to fix that right now so people know. But definitely check out Barrett on Twitter, because that's where you're going to get so much more of the documents and the information. I mean, one of the things I want to say about all of this, Barrett, tonight is that you are somebody who warned of all things 10 years ago, went to jail, and then we saw all the things that you warned about happen. So like the track record speaks for itself, in my opinion, on your reporting. You talked about persona management, which is basically bots that we see everywhere now. You talked about, the stuff that happened with Cambridge Analytica. You talked about all of this stuff. And over time, you could see that what you were saying was on the mark. I haven't seen anything that I said, look back on like, wow, Barrett was wrong. No, it seems like more and more as more info comes out, it's like, yep, Barrett was right. Barrett was right. He knows. So that's, to me, like, I think people should look at track records. This is like a conspiracy theories, like right in our face. They're not even theories. It's like conspiracy truth right here. You got military industrial complex, contractors, private corporations doing things that the CIA probably can't even legally do. So it's easier probably to have a private corporation do it. And Barrett and the activists are discovering it through anonymous leaks. And next thing you know, Barrett Brown is the target, and they're trying to throw him in jail for the rest of your life, which happened, and you fought that off. And now you're in England, right? You're
Yeah, in the UK, been based out of London for most of the last year, and was arrested here last year with the participation of Andy No, the alt-right figure, who is also one of the people who works for Thiel, is a creature of Thiel, as we'll explain later. Him working with the Metropolitan Police, and I was arrested and put into an immigrant removal center, and very nearly flown back to the U.S. to face what I learned to be apparent FBI charges that are sealed naturally, like the other ones, and so on and so forth. And we've been able to discover more about that thanks to a 4-hour recording of an FBI meeting in Los Angeles that occurred in late December 2020, in which the FBI is meeting with a former associate of ours and looking into not into the right-wing groups, so forth, that in a few weeks from then we're about to take over the Capitol building, but into myself and to those the journalists and researchers that work in my signal groups. And that's one of the things we'll I guess bears further discussion. I should note, so regarding my track record, yeah, it's very good. And that's partly because I was in the right place at the right time. It's also because the people I worked with were, unlike me, very, started with the familiarity in many cases with technology in a way that I'm not, and with the internet in a way that I'm not. My internet knowledge and capabilities really only extends to how do I use this to get information out and to fight disinformation and organize and frankly gain power to do more of that. One of the people that we worked with a little bit, and I didn't really know much about him at the time, was Aaron Schwartz, who did a FOIA request on something called persona management, which we discovered in the emails that were stolen by Anonymous in February 2011, and which exposed the Team Themis scandal. Now, that was the Team Themis scandal. Became a big press thing. That we were very, very effective with that. It was in every outlet. Congress looked into it. It involved Palantir, which one of the companies Peter Thiel founded with money from In-Q-Tel, the CIA's investment arm. It involved a few other firms that have since been absorbed into other firms, HB Gary, Barrico, and In-Game Systems. And it essentially involved a plot to discredit common enemies of the DOJ, of the intelligence community, and of a number of companies and outfits that were basically had approached the DOJ, which was serving as sort of a concierge service for black ops for those who want to suppress civil society on behalf of institutions. So to put that more clearly, the Bank of America and U.S. Chamber of Commerce at that time both approached the DOJ and were referred to a law firm called Hunt and Williams, big lobbyist firm. And that law firm helped to put together this Team Themis thing, put the individuals together, Palantir, HB Gary, Aaron Barr, the other individuals. And they were going to go after journalists. They were going to go after labor leaders, labor unions, groups like Code Pink, Stop the Chamber, very vanilla groups in most cases. Groups that are simply opposing the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, for instance, in their legislative agenda. Also going after WikiLeaks, which at that time was still doing tremendous work, was still able to do tremendous work, and was still on the right path in terms of the mission that I signed on to, and a lot of signed on to. That mission changed quietly years later, and we'll go into that a bit. Anyway, what came out was quite disturbing, and that was the first thing that came out: the fact that this very powerful network was going to, among other things, dig into the children of their targets, including labor unions using Facebook. And there were some examples in those emails where they said, "Oh, here's his child, and here, here's this guy." They go to a Jewish church. That was an actual quote by Aaron Barr. He referred to a temple as a Jewish church. Stuff that is it's all legal, because when it came out and Congress tried to investigate it, turned out the DOJ were the ones who got to determine if there were any crimes had been committed, and naturally the DOJ was not in a rush to do that because the DOJ had set this up. So you had a weird situation in which a Democratic presidency, the Democratic DOJ, was being protected by a Republican from Texas, who was on the head of the Judiciary Committee, who, rather than go after this big scandal that involved Democrats as well, shut it down because it was a bipartisan scandal. And many of the things that have happened since have been bipartisan scandals. And that is one of the reasons why, in a partisan atmosphere, even if the partisanship is quite reasonable, partisanship against the Republican Party, partisan atmosphere, it does help make it vastly more difficult for the public to understand what they're doing, and for those participating in some of these things to get what they're doing. Anyway, long story short is that Aaron Swartz wrote some essays and did broadcasts warning about things like TrapWire, which was a facial recognition technology that the company Stratfor had been involved in, and he also worked with persona management. His warning, just like mine and a few others, by that point, by the end of 2011, were over. They were not heard, because the people who had the most influence were not concerned about these issues, or in some cases were very intent on suppressing them. So, for instance, a guy who claimed, back into the Brookings institutions, a guy who wrote an article claiming that the TrapWire company was not actually owned by Cubic, this international conglomerate that's very little known but owns a lot of intelligence, and weaponry deals. That it wasn't actually owned by Cubic, and he knew that because they had put out a press release claiming that. And that person went on to become the editor of the Daily Beast. Aaron Swartz went on to die while being prosecuted. And persona management, the thing that Aaron Swartz did, it was one of the things we were all most concerned about. It involves social network bots, very sophisticated, sock puppets, to be used to interfere with elections, to put out disinformation, to discredit, to infiltrate,
to attack politicians. We've seen it.
And that term is no longer used for it, but there's other terms now in other companies. But that ended up, that was one of the things we warned about most, and that was one of the things that gradually became a major part, has been and continued to be, to an extent we're still not aware of, a major part of how disinformation operations are conducted and executed and made successful, and also a major part in how those who have the information the public needs, how they're drowned out or discredited. And so, as with that and much else, there were companies and individuals that we warned of, that we had written about. I even wrote about from prison in 2013, mentioning Archimedes Global and some other firms, Palantir and so forth, and then was put under a gag order as a direct result of that. And one of the most bizarre hearings, that ever occurred, in which the prosecutor claimed correctly that my article for The Guardian that I had written from prison was critical of the government. That's a quote. And that was the same year Hastings died, and the same year Swartz died. So these things, what I'm saying here, as we go forward, is to remember this. A lot of things in the last 10 years could have happened very differently. Trump's election was very closely won. I mean, in some cases, in some ways, it wasn't won. Obviously, he won the electoral, and it was won in a few states. And it is impossible to fail to acknowledge that the Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, Archimedes Global Alliance, Archimedes Global was one of the firms that shares executives with Cambridge Analytica, and that executive went on to become a Trump official. It's impossible to believe that very sophisticated, very widespread, and still poorly understood operation did not mean the difference between Trump in office and the results, and a incompetent moderate Democrat in office, which we can handle. We're handling it now. So that wasn't the only. The other consequences of what was and wasn't properly done by the press and by us, individual activists, everyone else. They go well beyond the U.S. They extend across the world, and we now know more about the direct correlations there. And as of this point, after 10 years of having to do research on this, and having been confronted with it, because I've continued to run groups to do research, and I've gone up against Palantir still again, and Andy No, and these neo-Nazi networks that are all working together. I'm now able to finally, I think, present a full picture that is devastating. It's absolutely devastating, and the picture. To the extent that one begins to understand it, one begins to realize that whatever your issue is, if it be climate change, immigration, minority rights, indigenous rights, these companies and these influence networks, they are well trained, and they've had 10 years to progress in making sure that anyone who's able to really make a difference on that issue in a way that is not approved of will not succeed. And so every other issue conflates into this issue, which is the control of information and disinformation by a small far-right elite led by Peter Thiel, founder of Palantir, the person who instigated the FBI investigation against me back in 2011, and who got Trump in office, and who has coined is advancing the philosophy called the dark enlightenment, which is the greatest threat to democracy and civilization in the 21st century.
Interesting term, a phrase, dark enlightenment. And when you were just talking, it reminded me of some other shows that I listened to that are more conspiracy tinged, but also very much in line with what the subject matter we're talking about: military industrial complex, mine war. Have you ever heard? You've heard of mine war, I'm sure, haven't you?
I don't believe so.
Michael Aquino. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino.
I may have heard his name. I don't know of him.
He's a U.S. military psyops guy who wrote a book called Mine War, and it's funny because InfoWars.
Was it a recent book? Was it done like last 10?
No, I would say it was done in the early 80s, maybe 90s even. But yeah, he's a guy who he was a Satanist actually, which is very interesting. I'm not against all Satanists at all. I'm not bringing that up as a big red flag on him.
I mean, they're novelties, at least. I mean,
it's very interesting. He's a very interesting character. More for the military intelligence and all of that. But we could go so far with this, so many different directions. I kind of just want to throw up this screenshot because I think
let's drill down on some of
this is what we're talking about, like kind of the stuff that's on Twitter that Barrett shows all the time on his Twitter page. And this is like basically a two-parter. I'm kind of giving you the best part at the end, the best part first, I think, on this one. Let me check. And I also, the people who are listening online, a lot of people are listening and leaving comments right now. We're going to flash some of those comments up, and we can definitely take questions. So if you want to, some questions from listeners right now or viewers online, you can definitely leave a question for us, and we'll see if Barrett wants to answer. But this is from Emma Best. It's funny because we're talking about a lot of local people tonight. From where I'm from, you're in England right now. You're by way of Texas. You're from Dallas, Texas. I'm in the Boston, Massachusetts area. Aaron Schwartz went to school, at least locally, I believe, at Harvard. Or where did he go to school? MIT? Harvard?
Yeah, because MIT, I think, because MIT was the one that.
That's when he hacked. That's the one he went into.
Well, that's what he prepared to download a bunch of files from. Yes.
And now Emma Best is also someone who's local, known through the anonymous movement as well. Denial of Secrets, I believe, is their project, their Twitter. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, there's also, I mean, in terms of figures in the movement, there's Lauren Pespiza, of course, one of your I think co-hosts on the show, Rob Reber, and the late Kevin Gallagher, and also Greg Hausch, who brought me into Anonymous, and who was one of the individuals I'll be speaking about in a bit. Now that we know
Which
more
makes
about
me
him.
sad on Greg, because
Yeah.
I've had Greg on the show. I've been on his show. We all like Greg, but geez, it's stuff speaks for itself, unfortunately. So let's talk about Emma Best, because she is like someone that has a lot of followers, a lot of juice. They're releasing a lot of information, a lot of doxes, and a lot of hacks and data. And she wrote you this was this on Twitter? I believe it must have been.
No, this was a Signal message.
A Signal message.
So this was in 2019. At the time, Emma Best, who I'd known years ago, when we were putting together some other leaking projects, investigation projects, and before I went to prison. And then Emma Best approached me in 2019. I had a nonprofit I had created, Pursuance, in order to do some things, to create some a framework for collaboration, and also to facilitate my old research project, Project PM, the one that the DOJ had deemed a criminal organization and went after, and some other projects. Anyway, and so we worked. She approached me and asked me to help put together a bunch of journalists and some apparatus for a major leaking project called 29 Leaks. This was a major, very important leak from a firm in London, Formations House, that essentially does money laundering, and through shell companies and something else called shelf companies for oligarchs and kleptocrats around the world. And so that was a huge deal. We brought in tons of journalists and brought in my volunteers and some of my volunteers and my other associates. We put them on the board of directors at DDoS, and Emma Best was one of my favorite people. I was very, very respected her a great deal. Knew about her history in the intelligence community, and also knew more private stuff that she, I guess, was not public and is still not public about private intelligence companies she thereafter worked for. But I'm someone who's advocated for Chelsea Manning and Snowden and so forth, and work with a lot of ex-military intelligence people. I mean, I like it when the U.S. trains them and then sends them over to me, or whatever. And so we developed a very close affinity, rapport. We're working on this big project and other things, and and we trust each other quite a bit. And I helped to bring in some set up some legal aid for them when at a point during this when they felt that they were about to be prosecuted. They were very, very shaken. And this is a discussion we had that I didn't think all that much about at the time. It's one of the things that I should have. But you just have so many interactions. If you're someone like myself, there's so much to keep straight, and to look into, and I am naive. I'm a naive person in a way I've discovered over the years. But basically, here is Emma Best filling me out about working with an enemy. And she's using Stratfor here as an example, because Stratfor, of course, is a firm that I have much reason to dislike. It's not just because Stratfor, I was prosecuted over the Stratfor hack, not just because I was hit with a $800,000 judgment over the Stratfor hack, and whereas the Stratfor hack was, of course, an FBI operation run by Sabu, and that was announced by the FBI itself in March of 2012. But because Stratfor does extraordinarily terrible things all over the world, like spying on activists in Bhopal, India, on behalf of Union Carbide, activists who are trying to get restitution for those who were crippled, maimed, poisoned in the Union Carbide disaster, things like that, spying on Occupy Wall Street, and also arranging disinformation to be placed in the New York Times, targeting activists, which happened to me right before my arrest. And so, and I explained back to Emma Best. Emma goes by they, I should say, they, not her. I explained back to
Emma Bay.
That's how Emma Best goes by they.
Okay.
I explained back to them that, as you can see here, that and you can't see all the conversation here, but I can post more if anybody wants to see it. That I'm willing to work with people I don't like. I'm willing to work with people I disagree with, even people I think are dangerous. I'm willing to do all kinds of things if the outcome will serve the public. But there's one particular rule that I follow above all else, is that I won't I won't lie to the public, that I won't deceive the public or allow the public to be deceived in any case where I can have a chance of getting this stuff out to them. So, having said that, there are some things that I know that the public needs to know that I don't put out, because I have a sense at this point, a very structuring sense of what will be what will end up being smothered and perhaps damage my credibility among the same people who laughed off Palantir and persona management and laughed off Schwartz years ago. So just, and because there's so much else that we can put out that we can document real well, and is exciting in some ways, and or interesting, so that it has a chance of getting out. Those things I do put out. So this answer, this question, this was the wrong answer, and we never spoke of it again. And it didn't occur to me to go back and look at this conversation until last year, when a number of things started happening at Distributed Denial of Secrets. First kind of in the dark, in the background, and then thereafter more publicly. And this gets us to the influence networks and the FBI and so forth.
Let me read this though, for people who maybe will listen to it on podcast later. And I want to do a follow-up question on this too, because Emma Bess wrote you: two kinds of people, ones who shake hands with their enemies when interests align, and those that can't. And then she asks you, which are you? And you come back and you say, I'm from Dallas, so what's up?
And what I mean by that is, as I've said before, I come from essentially the upscale criminal class. Like my dad was hit by the FBI when he was about my age. It was over actual, financial crime. He was a very successful financial criminal, which in Dallas is a high status profession. Until he got hit by the FBI and lost all his money. So I grew up rich until I was 7, and then he lost everything, and I was living in a single room with my mom in my grandma's apartment after that. So I have that's another advantage I have, is that I know deep down that things can change in a way that some people perhaps don't. I feel it. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that, look, I've been doing this a long time, 10 years. I was in prison. I was the head of a prison gang for 3 months. I have friends and colleagues and associates who are former governments, some who are, government officials. One of my favorites is a former city councilman in Dallas who ran for mayor and who is one of the most trustworthy and greatest guys I know. And I deal with evangelical Christians. I deal with, I just deal with anyone.
All kinds. And you're kind of, it's like, for people who are listening from Boston or maybe anywhere in the country, it's, I say it's like you're from Charlestown in Boston, or you're like me. Like I'm the kind of the same type of guy. I'm working class. I'll speak to anyone basically. And she says, I don't understand, or they respond, I don't understand this reply. You're asking me if I'm willing to make deals you come back with. You say to achieve some, and I'm telling you, I'm from Dallas. And you come back. I used to work with Hammond, as you know. I'm not sure, something's cut off. We hated something.
What I was saying there is we worked with Sabu and Hammond, and we did not get along, particularly with Sabu. This was Hammond was being kind of pulled along by Sabu during the period Sabu was under the FBI's control, which began in about June of 2011, and up until March 6th of 2012, when I was raided. Hammond was arrested, and the FBI revealed Sabu had been there. Sabu and all the hacks he was involved in had been under their control. Mueller later bragged about that operation. So yes, what I'm saying is that anonymous politics, even aside from prison politics, real politics. I can forgive a lot, and I can forget a lot if need be. But yeah.
And she comes back with, but you could shake hands with Stratford ? Do you have that in you ? And then you come back and say, but in all seriousness, I believe in getting things done. Only thing I won't do is engage in substantial dishonesty towards the public. Was that the part right there at the end? Engage in substantial dishonesty towards the public. You feel like you answered wrong for her,
simply because the next response from them was, and I can post that up if it's not. I'm not sure if it's already Twitter. Was basically something like just checking for later, and again, no further mention of it. And so again, at the time, I didn't know what they were referring to, but again, I figured they would tell me if whatever, and I still had so much respect for what DDoS had done and what we continued to do, that I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, which is a characteristic of mine that I know I have shed in the last year in particular.
It's difficult to trust people right away. You just want to trust people and believe in them.
And it's painful in some cases because some of the people who've been involved in this I've been friends with and close to for 10 years, 11 years. And some, I'll just leave it at that. So anyway, so last year, a couple things happened. Right after I was arrested and put into the immigrant removal center, and there's this whole home office FBI Met thing that intended to get me flown back to the U.S. that failed because, unbeknownst to them, I had been preparing to make an asylum bid for a while, and so was able, before this de facto rendition flight occurred, I was able to get my fiance Sylvia Mann out here. She was able to get this law firm to file for me, and the home office had to release me. Another element of the home office that wasn't in on this whole thing. That's a great thing about governments and institutions, is that if you're preparing for a conspiracy, against the law, you can't tell everybody. I mean, you can, but it makes it unwieldy. So whatever branch of the Home Office that approved my asylum claim as per British law, which the Home Office already broken on several occasions in this incident I've talked about elsewhere. They weren't aware that Barrett Brown was not supposed to be, that he was supposed to be, that we were just going to keep breaking the law, as they were found to have done quite a bit in that whole case. And so, I've got asylum. Anyway, when I came out, obviously, there were some things I needed to look into. And one of those things was I had been notified previously, vaguely, that some FBI meetings had been held about me, and that there were some things I needed to look out for. And I knew that from several sources. Rocco Castoro, who was executive editor of Vice for early on, and left over when he became, like me, he is a very staunch critic of the press in this age, and he's seen and worked with vast amounts of it. And he's also dealt with the intelligence community, and he knows the extent to which the intelligence community and FBI has inroads into certain outlets. Vice, for instance, has an executive that came straight from the State Department, oddly enough, and has some individual reporters who are, FBI aligned, whatever. That is, again, I should be clear when I talk about these outlets. I'm not saying that everyone there, or even most people there, know of or involved in these things, or the outlets don't do great work. And I've written for Vice, and I've written for the Intercept, which turns out to have been something very different from what it was declared to be. Outlets are not, they're not monoliths. Even individuals aren't monoliths. So that should be kept clear. Anyway, he provided me with a 4-hour recording and then several other long recordings, phone conversations between Val Brooks, who was a whistleblower, whose father was a Deutsche Bank executive who was found dead in 2014 and was then approached by a bunch of reporters, and then began working for Glenn for the Fusion GPS head, and otherwise, Fusion GPS was a firm that did the Steele dossier.
Was that Chris Steele, the guy? Yeah.
Yeah.
Same group.
Yeah, he didn't work for Steele. He worked for the founder of Fusion GPS, whose name escapes me, but who I've also now dealt with. Anyway, had a lot of adventures, a lot of escapades, trying to discover things. He dug into Deutsche Bank to find out what it had to do with his father's death, and the Trump campaign in Russia. Deutsche Bank is one of the most dangerous organizations in the world. Anyway, and so he was around our groups for a while and so forth, and around Emma Best's group. DDoS, and became entrenched in that. Anyway, so he had a 4-hour meeting at the LA FBI office in December 2019, December 2020. Again, a few weeks before the Capitol takeover by the alt-right. And the meeting, went on for 4 hours. They had flown up an agent from Houston named I forget, take his name in a second. Oh, David Coe, Special Agent David Coe of the Houston branch, specifically for this meeting. And they had someone from New York as well, whose name we don't know. And then the head of FBI's Los Angeles cyber division, whose name escapes me right now, all there. And Val, being the cunning sort that he is, recorded the whole thing secretly on his phone. And so it's a 4-hour meeting. A lot of it's about him. He's basically there to make a deal because he has a child custody issue involving his girlfriend. It's very complicated. And so they talk about that, and then they start asking about me and my signal groups and those in the signal groups, the individuals involved, people I've worked with for a long time, like Joe Fionda, whose Twitter account, Fionda Vision, incidentally, was suspended from Twitter a few days ago at the behest of Louise Mensch, the former British member of Parliament, who's been some sort of chaos agent working for whoever.
She seems a little out there.
The thing is that here's the thing, and that's something that is important too. There's a number of people who appear to be just crazy and just and that is, and some people who are as well, but there are tactics that we can demonstrate now, showing private communications from people versus public communications that show that there's some people who act crazy in a way that is very helpful in achieving certain strategic goals, such as making sure that they're not paid attention to by the press and their dealings are regarded as obscure. To what extent Louise Mensch falls into that vibe, we don't know, but she is definitely operating for ends other than, she is not an anti-Russia crusader. She had meetings, and anyway, bottom line is one of the people we've had dealings with, Louise Mensch, over the years, and she's been a real pain in the ass, of course, and is also an FBI cooperator and deals with these same FBI agents. Anyway, we had this long four recording that basically shows Val giving over some information about individuals or researchers in these groups. So the signal groups I ran, they're not hacker groups. The only hacker sort we had in there was Larry Love, and he doesn't do any hacking because he's already been indicted for hacking by the U.S. and so he does other kind of activism. Anyway, so the FBI just asked him about just what I've been up to. I was in rehab at the time, or just left rehab. They ask about that, where I went to rehab. They just other questions, and then there's an exchange there, and you can see that on my pinned tweet. You can see there's a thing about Twitter suspending a tweet about the FBI of mine the day before an article came out in BuzzFeed on that same FBI agent. And that thread includes some clips of the recordings, and the entire recordings are also available, but they're long and very obnoxious to listen to because the FBI, the way they talk, is just really out there. Anyway,
do you think that they were freaked out? Because I've listened to that audio, and it is like kind of freaky, but I didn't realize who he was. I didn't, because I've read about him. I remember, I think there was a Rolling Stone story or something like. He was
New York Times did a big story on him,
and
then burned him, and that's another thing we have.
So like, do you think that they were like thinking that you were working with him and you were going to expose
I had been working with him. I had been working with him. He approached me. He was advised by Glenn Reynolds, by Fusion GPS head. He was advised by Glenn Reynolds to approach me back in 2017 when I was getting out of prison. A lot of people were, and I have the email exchanges now, kind of showing that. So. That and some other people. There's just been a lot of attention on me from the intelligence community and private intelligence community because, I'm often either a threat or someone they could potentially try to use. And so I've been working with him because he was indeed a whistleblower. But he had done amazing work digging into to Deutsche Bank, his father's files. Had committed hacks as well in order to do that. He tells the FBI about that. I hacked this, hacked that, tried to hack this New York Times editor. Of course, they're not interested in that. They're out there, because those are crimes that don't lead them to Black activists or transparency activists. And I work heavily with both. Anyway, so from that, I was able to get a sense that, okay, well, this is on again. Me and the FBI are about to have this, another sort of shadow war. This time it's going to be ignored to a large extent because I've lost a lot of press reach due to my Puritanism. I started out as a press critic, and I'm a very virulent press critic. And as someone who has worked with, and been interviewed by, and been written about by every major outlet,
the largest outlets
minor
in the world.
ones across the world,
Guardian.
and been a source for a lot of them. I happen to have a unprecedented trove that just by which I can and have proven wrongdoing, considerable wrongdoing, malfeasance by people who have gone on to major roles. A few of them have disappeared. Adrian Chen was one of the worst offenders. He was a gawker. He went on a Twitter break about a year and a half ago after I put out some stuff on him. Joseph Min, a guy who played a big role in a lot of this. He was just hired by the Washington Post to be their cyber reporter. Joseph Min is actually, he struck a deal with H.B. Gary, the intelligence firm that was involved in that Team Themis thing, about a year before he wrote the article praising, Aaron Barr and his company, and then so on and so forth. Joseph Min also convinced Kevin Gallagher, who Lauren Pespiza, your host there, knew very well, who created my legal defense effort out of nothing, essentially, and has been, one of my most closest colleagues for 10 years.
Was he like your brother? Was he like you? Seriously, it seems like he was your biggest brother. He had your back, right?
He put himself at risk, not just risk. I mean, he was targeted by the DOJ, and so was everyone who donated to my legal defense fund that he created for me turned out to have been identified by the DOJ and the FBI, and then Kevin sued them over it in 2017 in the District of Northern California, and the judge agreed that, but unfortunately there were these venue issues and so forth that. Anyway, and he was also targeted very heavily by a lot of the people, some of whom are FBI cooperators, some of whom are very vicious, and we'll, anyway, and Kevin had, like myself, some mental issues, drug issues, and so when I got out of prison, one of the first things I realized when I got out of the immigrant removal center, realized that Kevin had disappeared essentially from online about the day before I'd been arrested. He disappeared from all the signal groups. He had not tweeted on his the free Barrett _ account he's had for 10 years, his own account, Aegis, AEGIS. And so we started making inquiries and just, maybe he's taking a break or something. Finally, I reached out to his family on the 9th of June. And, they said they hadn't heard from him either. Finally, on the 10th, I sent a activist involved, a sex worker advocate in San Francisco that I know, who was involved in these groups, and sent her to go to his home. And she got the landlord to open up, and she found him dead. And there's a lot of questions around, what drove him to disappear at that point, and what drove him to just not talk to anybody for several weeks. And was it some of the same things that we've seen elsewhere that have had an effect on us? The same things a lot of us are subjected to. And we know a little bit about it because some of it was public. There was some Twitter engagement that was public against Kevin that was done by a few of the people who we're now working with DDoS and the people around it. And so, and one of those people is named called Kurtaner. He's a hacker who's become real well known. His real name is Aubrey Cottle. He is a longtime CSIS Canadian, police asset. Has bragged in the past about being at work with the FBI. Has had some role in child porn honeypots, perhaps, possibly because he was running a Chan and maybe got arrested. Who knows? Is a very bizarre individual and another example of someone who actually pretends to be crazier than he is. He's also got a drug problem, like we all do.
When you say pretends to be crazy, that like when you said that earlier, that's exactly who I was thinking of. Like, oh, another one, and you just named him. I actually have his video. Do you want to play a little video from Kurtaner, like to show the craziness?
Absolutely.
And I think this is so another example of where Barrett's been right. You've been calling out this guy and saying he's got to be an agent. There's something not right about, like, you just pointing it out.
Before you play that, just because you said that, I want to point out that I was late on that issue. In fact, other people warned me, including Kevin Gallagher, about him. And Carmo 601, the guy on Twitter that documented a lot of his stuff, he'd been calling him out publicly for a long time. So, and I told everyone, no, we got it under control. We're watching him. Greg Hausch, told Kevin, no, blah blah. And so it took me a while until I saw the other stuff. So this was something that I failed on. I failed as a leader because he had infiltrated our group around the time I was traveling from Antigua to the UK, and Greg was vouching for him, and but it when I said earlier that the FBI, there are no hackers in my group, that was the exception. That was the one who was in there. He was talking about hacks that he was performing supposedly, and we got a lot of people got nervous about him, and asked us to get rid of him. And finally, after I got out of prison or out of the internment center, I asked him about something that I'd come across, and we kicked him out. And then that started. That's when things got weird. But yeah, go ahead and show the recording.
And the thing about Kitchener, I think, is important to note is he's bragging about things that are crimes, and he never
has been for over a year.
And it doesn't seem to get arrested. So I want to play this video. This is Aubrey Caudle, self-professed founder of Anonymous. Yeah. Here he is. Let's see if we can get this up right now.
Nothing scares me. Nothing. Yes, I doxed the truckers. I did it. It was me. I hacked Give, Send, Go, baby. And I'd do it again. I'd do it 100 times. I did it. I did it. Come at me. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to me, huh? I hacked Epic Hosting! I hacked Parler! I hacked Gab! I hacked Truth Social! I hacked Go! Give, Send, Go! I don't care! You can literally put my name into the news tab on Google, and you can find everything I've done! I am literally in every mainstream media publication for the things that I do. I'm not an unknown actor. I'm literally a famous fucking cyber-terrorist. And you think that you can scare me? See, they always default to the pedophile accusations. They always default to that because they have nothing else. It's actually some projection. That guy, I want to see his browser history. That guy loves little girls. I've hunted pedophiles. I've outed pedophile rings online. I have gotten pedophiles arrested, buddy. You have no idea who the hell I am.
Well, I should have given people a little warning on that one. That's pretty startling to.
And that's not nowhere near the most. I mean, if you want to see some disturbing stuff, the messages he sent me after I started discovering what him and some of his partners and what his involvement in. Anyway, yeah, they're disturbing, and it's hard to say which part is meth and which part is, again, which part is intentional. To the extent that some of it has been intentional.
He brought it up too.
It has been successful in convincing some people like that. He's
he said the word actor. He said the word actor right there, which is so telling. And then he talked about what you've brought up about his bragging about how he set up kiddie porn. What does he call them? Kiddie porn stings, or not stings.
Yes,
kiddie porn honeypot.
Yeah, he's talked about that in various contradictory ways over the past 10 years. That people, I didn't know about this guy until he ended up in my signal groups, but other people have been tracking for years, including those close to him and the mother of his child, and so he's been lying about their. We don't know which of the 20 or 30 contradictory versions of the truth, but the one in the Atlantic article about him, because Dale Barron of the Atlantic, for some reason, wrote an article about Anonymous's revival a year and a half ago, perhaps, and put out a tweet claiming him to be the founder of Anonymous, and that was based on nonsense. And he was called out for it by Professor Gabriella Coleman, who's been watching us for years and all that. Anyway, but even that article talks about him being approached by CSIS. Here's the problem. We have 30 or 40 different points that would make when someone's suspicious of someone, and we have about 10 that would get someone kicked out of any movement that's not this fucked up transparency movement that's deteriorated so much since for over the last 10 years. And then we've got several things that just are smoking guns, like several smoking guns. And I made that known to Emma Best before I knew about them being involved together. So anyway, so after Kevin's body was found, and while I was looking at these FBI recordings and so forth and other documents, and people approaching me about some of these issues, I realized that Kurtaner was one of the ones, along with some other people who are also known contractors and involved either with Canadian or U.S. police intelligence. Kurtaner was one of the ones in a Twitter thread where they were messing around and as usual, and Kurtaner was among them. So was Kurtaner's partner in this, woman named Elizabeth Shaw, who is a contractor we now know a lot about, and that's another story. Another was this guy Jack, as they call him. He's another Canadian involved. His father works for the Canadian intelligence. Jack is one of the most prolific of those who try to break us, like mentioned, like when at Hastings' death. Jack, he has all his Twitter accounts he's created that he'll come to me and make fun of Hastings' death and all that. And then, of course, when Kevin died, he did the same there. Those people were in this thread, and they said, "Oh, hey, how about you, Kevin? Were you at the ball?" And a lot of some of the tweets, by the time I got them and screenshotted them, were still there. Some were deleted, and as by people who don't just delete their tweets automatically. So from that, I knew something was really wrong. And then I realized that Greg Hausch, who of course knew Kevin through me and through all this stuff, and Greg Hausch was not. He wasn't cooperating in this investigation with us, as one might thought he did. In fact, he was doing quite the opposite. And at the time when I asked Greg Hausch, hey, like, I need you to pay attention to this. This is important. This person Kurtaner that you're bringing on your show, because Greg had a huge portion of rolling out Kurtaner to the public. When I asked Hausch, to help out with this investigation into Kevin's death, he said, "I'm sorry, I'm just got gone. I'm out of town right now. I'm busy." Turns out I get some photos and information later on. He was busy because he was at DEF CON meeting with a number of other FBI cooperators, including some that have been active against us and some of the others that were working with Kurtaner. And there's photos of them and all that. So I kicked Greg out, and I'll say this publicly just so everyone understands. I'm someone who, when my mom was prosecuted, I was facing 100 years, and they tried to get me to do a deal to plead to one of the linking charges, and I would have not been facing 100 years. But that link would have, that precedent would have endangered everyone, even more than they already are. The DOJ could use that for other reporters and activists. I turned that deal down, and then when they said, "Well, the mom's, we're about to prosecute your mom," which they had been warning for a while, I said, "Go for it." So, Greg, however, no matter how close you are to me or whatever, like, there are, this is in my estimation a war. I think it's the war. It involves all the wars, and we haven't even gotten yet into the actual war that's going on right now and how this all connects to that.
Yeah,
but,
Ukraine.
But so Greg Hausch, I kicked out of the group, and I have quite frankly, and Kurtaner and them have made this public. I've threatened him in various ways, and I have forced him to give me some information about some of the people involved, and that is something that's the least of what I would do for someone like for the public and for someone like Kevin, who is one of the few people who, his death is because of me. Kevin's death is because of me, and it was, and his deterioration towards the end was because of me. And it was facilitated by these people that were now working with Emma Best and DDoS Secrets, and with the FBI, and with, by their own admission, an ex-Scotland Yard official whose name we know, James Patrick, Neil Rauhauser, one of the ones who actually comes up in my bond hearing. He set me up He was an FBI cooperator who swatted other FBI cooperators and other people, and is one of the most disgusting individuals involved, and has bragged about causing people to die, causing people to kill themselves, as has Kurtaner and as has Jack, the other guys. All these people involved, and so as you can imagine, it was very difficult for me to pursue this strategically. I was enraged. I was suicidal from about that point up until a few months ago, when I closed down my groups and cut out and sort of ended my affiliations for the most part with the Transparency Active movement and started working more with Black Socialists of America and a few other and some individuals, groups that don't tolerate this stuff. That's the other thing about Anonymous, is that, and it's really one of the things about hackers, the kind of hackers who get involved in this stuff. I've dealt with a lot of them, and I've come to I've really had difficulty trusting many of them. And that there's exceptions, obviously. Aaron Schwartz was a certain kind of person, but there are people who are not like you and I, and it's hard to even imagine the things they're capable of and do regularly, and they are used by the FBI and other groups. They're very effective, and what they do ends up looking like drama and stuff like that. And so things can be wiped out. People can be destroyed very easily, and it makes it, even when we have the documentation, it's an uphill battle to not only just get the press to address it, but even to get other activists to acknowledge it. And that's the thing that is that's led us to where we are today.
We definitely want to start putting up some of the comments. We got a lot of people listening online. If you have questions, you can also, but I do want to make sure that we get to the Peter Thiel PayPal gang and some of these other guys, Joe Rogan, and just just flesh it out a little more. But let's go to some of the comments.
In fact, we'll get to that. We'll connect to this, unfortunately. So we'll get to that next.
People saying looking forward to this right off the bat. Rod Weber writes, the Intercept is such a lovely honeypot, which I thought was right on the mark. I think you said that earlier. And Kurt Tantner loves to help the feds. So it seems like a lot of your audience already is familiar with a lot of this content. I know that you get upset. Maybe it's not getting out to a greater, wider, news week or some of the controlled opposition.
The more upsetting part is that it is who, is the people involved who should know better and who do know better, that, obviously it's a heavy thing. It's a heavy thing to have to say, okay, well, I was accidentally working with this guy. It's a much heavier thing when, like, you were warned, like, over and over again, like, this guy is doing this. This is what he's done to our other activists. This is what he's doing right now. And then, so, at that point they get entrenched, and it makes it harder for them to do the right thing. And so we run up against that all the time. That's what's upsetting.
And I'm being made sport of too, but that's okay. They're comparing me to some guy from the Big Bang Theory. A Facebook user, I think I know who this is. I think it's Lauren Pespiza. Barrett was the first show I did with you, Mike, which was sadly the day we heard about Aaron Schwartz dying. It's such a weird. We were doing a show about you, Barrett, and I had Greg and Lauren come in, and I think I had heard of Greg. I was actually suspicious of him at the Occupy movement, actually. I was a little more libertarian back then, too. So I was questioning a lot of stuff back then, questioning everything. And I had gone down a rabbit hole. I was, but it's funny, when Greg came on and Lauren came on, it was about Barrett Brown being in jail and how do we get you out? And that's when I met Lauren, the day I met Lauren. And she later became my co-host for a long time. She's done a lot of good stuff. I like Lauren a lot. Let's post some more comments. How can you say DOJ without spitting?
A lot of practice.
What up from C-Bus? I don't know if you know who that is.
Sure, that name sounds familiar. It's a cool name either way, but I think I know that person.
Rest in power, Aaron Schwartz. Same person writes, rest in power, Michael Hastings. You mentioned Michael Hastings a few times. You mentioned Aaron Schwartz. I know them both. Tell us about Michael Hastings a little more, if you don't mind.
The main thing about Michael Hastings that people need to know is that he was, to some extent, openly and also covertly involved in Anonymous through me. In fact, he was integral to us when I first began actively involved with Anonymous from the AnonOps server, working on Tunisia, which had just begun. We had Tunisian nationals and Tunisian exiles in the server, and the revolt in Tunisia had been going on, been spreading for days. It had not gotten any press whatsoever in the West, and so one of the Tunisians who was in country, goes by Slim 404, Slim Amanu. He calls himself a soft power alchemist, quite correctly. He was, kind of a leader in that, and a lot of help was given to the Tunisians. Some of the same stuff is being done for Ukraine right now, except without. Well, I'll go into that later. But and Hastings, is the one that you can trace, as you can look and see. He is the one who got the attention on the revolution using Anonymous and the novelty of it, the novelty of Anonymous, taking down Tunisian government websites and providing and taking down some of their cyber police networks, basically their digital forensics people, and also providing a code to prevent the takeover or infiltration of Facebook groups, Facebook accounts used by organizers, back then, to prevent them from being identified and tortured. Slim Amanu, who was in that channel in AnonOps, was identified and tortured and held. He said he doesn't call it torture, but UN definition is, and held for 4 or 5 days, and he was released as the Ben Ali regime fled, and then he joined the provisional government. So that was our first Anon cabinet minister, back when that was a good thing to have. Michael Hastings, so Michael Hastings was integral to making sure that this revolution was shown as what it was, because as we all know, information warfare, is all warfare is ultimately stems from information warfare, and all warfare stems from information. If you don't know who the enemy is, or if you think the enemy is something else, whatever. If so. He made sure that in the face of people like Pamela Geller and others, some of the big Islamophobe types, who some people are going to paint this as Islamic fundamentalist revolt, which it certainly was not. Tunisia is not even that much of an Islamist fundamentalist country. But anyway, Hastings was involved in that and some other things. He was early member of Project PM, my group that was later a criminal organization. He had me call him a few weeks, after the Snowden revelations, and we had a conversation about, how it was now going to be easier to bring attention to the things that we had been looking into. He was looking into the Brennan, the CIA director at the time, and a few other subjects, and also my case. He was going to be coming down to interview me about some of the things that had gone unreported that we had discovered about the FBI networks that had been involved in my case and Schwartz's. And but one of his last appearances was on the Young Turks show. This is the one named after. And there's a clip there of him talking about about surveillance and how he feels he's being surveilled, and that now that the FBI has my phone, they have all his messages to me. And he goes on to say, and this is very sad. He goes on to say, I'm not saying that I'm under surveillance, but people like Barrett Brown and all that, but I have had, it's almost an afterthought, but I have had people tell me I am, special forces contacts and all that. And it's sad because, so Michael Hastings is a guy who, like, when he would email me, something like, I got a big story coming tomorrow, that ended up being the Rolling Stone piece that took down General McChrystal. Like, he was among the few those journalists in the U.S. who were really very, very dangerous.
Overturning rocks. I mean, no generals ever go down by a journalist in this country. That doesn't happen. Stanley McChrystal, that was a huge story.
Yeah, and he went back to Afghanistan and did another story on Army psyops, Army general using psyops on visiting senators, U.S. senators, like psyops techniques. This is the kind of thing that we were all worried about, how it all connected. He was a fantastic person. I met him in 2009 through a mutual, or through a guy who was a fan of his, and we wrote for the same deal. I blurbed his book, his last book, on the back cover there with Frank Rich or somebody. And he was going to blurb mine, did blurb the one that was published when I was in prison. he was definitely being investigated by the FBI and the intelligence community. There's no doubt about it. And his connection to me was just part of it. I mean, this guy was a big boy, beyond me. And the really sad thing about his death is that the FBI denied having any files on him and any interest in him whatsoever. Then some FOIA requests were done, and it turned out, here's some articles. They were interested in the reporting he did on Bergdahl, the private that fled, went AWOL in Afghanistan, and then it turns out there's actually a lot more documents they have on him, and some of them were discussed openly in my gag order hearing, and that's one of the things that I've been putting out for years and years, and there's my FBI agent, Agent Smith, the one I threatened to investigate him and do all their Aaron Barr tactics to him, the tactics that HP Gary was going to use against activists and all that. I threatened to do all that to him, which I should have. He testifies there, and these documents are public, on having, he listened to all the phone conversations I had with every journalist, everyone, and names them all. And refers to having the recordings and notes, 2 sets of notes. And that included my conversations with Michael Hastings. So just from there,
they were listening the whole time. They were recording.
Well, yes, certainly, but listening and taking notes and putting in a gag order over it. And so just from that, without even going into the emails between myself and Michael Hastings, that would be of huge interest to the DOJ. And they had my emails for access to them a year before I was arrested. They had a secret search warrant, and our messages and all that. Him being mentioned, in my Vanity Fair article on him as a member of Project PM, which, remember, everyone who contributed to that website was investigated, was pursued. There was another subpoena for everyone who contributed to it. Again, everyone who donated to my legal fund was legally subpoenaed, identified. The idea that Michael Hastings would not on their radar, and that they've already been caught lying several times, the FBI, about having documents on him and all that. And another FOIA request showed internal communications that Mueller was himself got involved when the press started asking questions after his death. This is one of the things that was unfortunate, because Mueller was seen by many, by the time I got out of prison, as the one who was going to save us from Trump and investigate the election.
Clean hands.
That didn't quite work out. And in fact, what Mueller ended up doing was just to give you, this is another great example of how this stuff works. The Mueller Commission, in 2017, they leaked to the Washington Post and a couple other outlets that they were looking into a couple of firms. One of them is called White Canvas Group, was co-founded by Michael Flynn. Another was Flynn Intel Group, which obviously founded by Michael Flynn as well. In relation to the Mueller Commission, which was not just about Russia, it was about any interference in the election, and that was reported. And then you never heard about these firms again. And the reason for that, and I predicted this at the time, a number of places. I said these firms, their role in this, in the role of several other firms like Palantir and Archimedes Global, they will be discovered. They'll be mentioned, and then as soon as someone at the FBI realize what the connections are, like Mueller has a whole speech on the FBI website, where he's bragging about his over controlling Sabu and taking control of Anonymous, doing a hack and arresting 6 hackers, which apparently includes me. They protected these firms, and these firms like Stratford, was having secret meetings with General Flynn in 2010, and then probably thereafter. So the FBI and Mueller or anyone was never going to really look into the companies like Palantir and all that they violated, that they committed crimes in defense of, to protect their own secrets. And so these firms, that's why Palantir, when you see it mentioned in the press, it's very, very few mentions of it being caught in the New York, the fact that the New York Times even reported, just that one day that, Palantir was caught involved in this election interference. And, they claim that they weren't, or these documents show they were. Oh, well, it turns out there was just one of our employees just went off and did the same excuses they used in 2011 when we caught them in 4 different lies. So it's a sad affair, but again, my track record, I do put that forward, in asking people to please pay, even if it's cumbersome, to pay attention to the things that I've been putting out the last few weeks and today and in the near future, because it is a difficult position to be in, where you have to say, hey, I know the truth about all these world affairs, and hey, I had a role in these things, and hey, my villains like Peter Thiel, they're the real villains of the world, I was right. it's not something that a society like ours, it's not something that you can communicate without resulting in a good deal of either just being laughed off or considered a megalomaniac. I am a megalomaniac, and I have no problem taking credit for things. The fact of the matter is, it wasn't just me that could have saved a lot of things from happening, including the big ICE roundups, everything Trump did, everything Palantir is going to do, and it's Anduril, Andy Ngo, the alt-right, all the people that we now have direct connections to Peter Thiel. There's a lot of people, and a lot of them sacrificed a lot, and I would hate to think that these sacrifices and the ones that are still going on are for nothing. I would like to think that the public has the wherewithal, and the press has the wherewithal, and sometimes it's the courage and the sense of responsibility to start going into these things, because just what Palantir has been caught doing and still pushing on with, that should be enough to freak anyone out. And you start adding to that the 100 other things, and then you add in that we don't know everything. We haven't caught everybody. It's scary. So we can better get to that Thiel stuff and still connect these other issues. I think if you want to show the screenshots now of
here's another one. A question too. I want to ask you real quick. Hey Barrett, I was curious about your thoughts on various anonymous accounts on Twitter like Anon News posting about the Ukraine conflict. Big ups on the recent Thiel stuff too. Interesting reads. What's your comment on those Twitter accounts that are huge, that have a lot of followers?
Yeah, so that's very important. So it's wonderful that the infrastructure and the idea of Anon, the major Anon News are helping to oversee this digital warfare against Russia. I've been anti-Putin for 20 years. I was anti-Putin back when Thomas Friedman of the New York Times was writing columns about how Putin was going to be the savior of democracy, and then won a Pulitzer for those columns. And when Friedman in 2005 mocked the U.S. intelligence community for spying on Russia, like wondering what, is there anything you really want to know about Russia? I've been very anti-Putin, and I wrote an article that TrapWire actually illegally used without my permission, sent out to its paid subscribers about a year before I went to prison over that. I wrote a whole article about the FSB and Putin and his rise to power, and the riots and the bombings in 1999, and the part the FSB played in that false flag attack. Incidentally, I'm also glad that in the last couple of weeks, the reports of the Russians potentially using false flag attacks in Ukraine to facilitate their war, I'm glad that has gotten back in the stream, because now it's a lot of people in the press, particularly, they forget, they think that false flag attacks are something that Alex Jones made up, or that just can't happen, that don't make any sense, even though these are, false flag attacks are some things that happen in middle school, really, to some extent. Like, it's just doing something to blame on somebody else. It's a very simple thing, and it's very effective. Anyway, so I'm anti-Putin. I have also been investigated as a Russian agent by the FBI, and I know that from several sources, including my lawyers, and also there's an article by one of the people who were involved in tormenting and doing disinformation about us, who was met with an FBI agent with some kind of intelligence clearance, intelligence aspect, like a special FBI agent, and wrote about this on his site, chronicle.su, which also includes lots of fake articles written under my name. And he goes into his meeting with this FBI agent, and some of the details in there are such that I know he's not making it up, because he mentioned some things that he would not be aware of, that the FBI was looking into, and some incidents involving some hacks that the FBI was originally going to use against me before they realized that I could prove that the hacks were actually done by government. Anyway, so, and I also use my lawyer. I mean, I've been going to Russia today for a long time. So, in the FBI's defense, there were a lot of people who were working for the Russians without knowing it. Again, these are influence networks. It's very easy. Right. There were those who were working for the Russians, openly with, Russia Today or Sputnik, and that, those are very different outlets, but they both essentially are, when it comes down to it, arms of the Russian, of the Kremlin, Sputnik especially. And it's, again, I hope that Russia, I hope Russia is has its armies obliterated here, and I hope a lot of Russian soldiers, if need be, I hope they die. And I hope, and I have friends that are going down to Ukraine, to the border, to assist with people part of the anarchist community in London who are going over. Other friends who just came back from the Kurdish autonomous zones as well. I've got a lot of interesting friends here in London since getting here. It's a great city. Anyway, having said that, right now, what's going on with Anonymous and that Uranon news account, which is the central mode of its infrastructure, and with a lot of the other, some of the individuals who've been around for a while, they have been co-opted by the intelligence community and the FBI. And we know that through various means. And that's a problem. And it's not a problem because, we don't want people going after Russia. We do. I certainly do. It's a problem because when you get in bed with the FBI or the CIA, the outcomes are not always what you might expect them to be. And that's something that, again, it's one of those things that's seemingly obvious, but it's one of those seemingly obvious things that, like, even very intelligent, put together people need to be reminded of sometimes. The CIA has a long history, even of its, aside from the demented nature of many of its goals over the past, since its creation, has done sometimes the opposite of what it intended to do. And the FBI, Jesus Christ, I mean, there are better ways to commit heroic deeds and to assist countries in need than to work under the clandestine control of people who we know and can prove are active intelligence members. And Uranon News, which blocked me and also blocked Karma, the other blocked Karma about a year ago for when Karma asked about Kirchner and his neo-Nazi stuff and FBI ties. They blocked him. Kirchner, by the way, I should have noted, has 15-year history of making racist, anti-Semitic remarks. Some of them, I mean, just even beyond what you'd expect from a dumb teenager, a white hacker kid. I mean, up until not like a long time ago. I'm saying these continue until a year ago. So it's all the more frightening that they're not one of these articles that came out in a British outlet a few months ago, rolling out Kirchner, claims that he was inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, and so was his partner Elizabeth Shaw. It's frightening how well they've done to co-opt and to present these people using the press, like Vice, which did a documentary on Kirchner, which so forth. It's frightening and disturbing, the implications of that. People. There's a website that the Internet Hope Machine that Kirchner was involved in setting up, and that was being pointed to by some of these articles. And that's where activists should go sign up. BLM activists, any black person whatsoever, any activist does not need to be directed to get their information and to work under someone who is himself a Nazi in many ways, and who is demonstrably, according to all accounts, including those close to him, working with one of the most capable Nazi leaders of our age, Andrew Arnheimer, Weave, that man right there with the swastika. So let's get to that. Let's get to Weave.
Tell us about it. And I'm going to step up and I think my girlfriend's here. My dog's about to start barking. So I'm going to let you take over, and I'm just going to get up for a second. I want to let people know I'm not walking off on the convo. I'm totally into this. I just want to make sure my dog doesn't ruin it. So tell us about this guy, Andrew Weave.
I first met Weave in 2007. He was an editor at Encyclopedia Dramatica, which was, it's kind of the way I learned about, 4chan and B and all this internet culture that I had been entirely ignorant of, having sort of lost touch with the internet, over the years prior. And I found it all very interesting, and I found all the whole culture very, potentially very powerful, because of the ways in which they organize these raids out of nothing, emergently. They were raiding video games and all that. But I predicted, and so did a lot of military individuals and intelligence community over time, that this would lead, that this 4chan stuff, these chans and these emergent groups and this identity they were creating for themselves, and their ability to emerge, to quickly bring people in and put them to use in a decentralized way, I knew that was going to be a powerful thing. That's why I kept close tabs on 4chan, and was in a position to write about Anonymous, in the years leading up to, especially when Scientology kicked off, and then in Tunisia, Australia. That's what got me brought into Anonymous in the first place. One of the articles I wrote in 2010, by Greg Hausch and some of the other people who still controlled a lot of the Anonymous infrastructure. Anyway, so I knew Weave through there. Didn't think much of him. Was obviously a bad person in a lot of ways, a troll, funny sometimes, and was good at helping to compile and create internet drama. I did a little operation with him that he named Operation Ruin, where the strategy was, this was again in sort of information wargaming for those of us who knew our futures would be in that direction. The purpose was to find individuals of that we opposed for some reason, who were not so well known that we couldn't get the Encyclopedia Dramatica page we created for them to be one of the top results for their name. So Mitchell Rosansky, who was a Dallas City councilman, had come to the Dallas City Council a few years back and denounced a local Eagle Scout for building bat houses in one of the parks. So this old white, kind of just not quite with it councilman, who was vastly incompetent, he came to the city council wearing vampire teeth and gave a speech and denounced the kid as Dracula and said so stuff like, well, you can see the Encyclopedia Dramatica article is still up. So I compiled all those quotes and put it there on page. And then Weave's contribution there was just to Photoshop him into vintage gay pornography, that was one of Weave's favorite things to do. So, that was the bulk of my interaction with Weave. And then I stopped hanging around Encyclopedia Dramatica in the years to come. And, by 2010, 2011, I was running Project PM, and then brought into Anonymous, the activist portion, had no dealings with Weave, who was not an activist. Weave started attacking me publicly on Twitter in the weeks before my arrest. And, and I imagined that was probably because he likes to do that, because he likes to do damage to people. And he knew I was he knew I was under fire. And so he spread claims that I lived with my mother, that I was a heroin addict, which was, is several years out of date. I'm a Suboxone addict, so forth. And I later saw some people close to Weave spread those same rumors. And unfortunately, some of them made their way into the anonymous legal defense community. Anyway, so when I was in prison, Weave was prosecuted as well at some point for exposing an error with AT&T or Apple or some kind of thing that wasn't even a hack, and it was an unjustified prosecution. So he was rolled into this category quite incorrectly of hacktivists who were out there that were important and doing great things. Weave wasn't trying to help anybody. Weave was not an activist at any point. And I was I didn't realize this. I was in prison, but he was becoming a neo-Nazi. And this was known to some extent by people who were around him out there. And there's a documentary that was made called Hacker Wars it's about me and Jeremy Hammond and Weave. Weave was easier to get footage of because Hammond and I were both still already in prison, and Weave wasn't yet. He was being prosecuted. So, between that and the New York Times op-ed that bizarrely enough compared both me and Weave to Socrates, well-intended, just not paying close attention. He had an unusual position. He was a prosecuted activist with a lot of street cred who knew a lot of these anonymous people, including the defendants in the PayPal deal, because a lot of these people, frankly, were trash. Some of the ones who were prosecuted, for DDoS, didn't make them a hero. Some of them turned and flipped. I know this because I was basically in charge of putting together the legal defense back in 2011. And that's when I brought in, Jay Lederman, who was a great lawyer who also died last year under weird circumstances, and another lawyer named Stanley Cohen, who defended Mercedes Heifer. And Stanley was a strange guy. He had me meet him once in New York when I went up there after and he told me I was going to get charged with the RICO Act. It was a weird interaction. And anyway, he fits into this too. So that's making a point of pointing out. So Stanley Cohen, if we go back to the conversation here, Stanley Cohen is the lawyer who represented Mercedes Heifer. Mercedes Heifer here, again, knows Weave and is friends with him because, again, Mercedes Heifer, I'm going to be honest here, this is one of the people that I got lawyers for and didn't want to be prosecuted, was very upset about the way they were rated to heavily armed raids over a DDoS on PayPal and Amazon in support of WikiLeaks. She's white trash. I'm sorry, she is, and a terrible person. And anybody who wants to get a sense of her character, they can see the tweets that she put out, which have been deleted since, but I've since put back up, in which she talks about how she and Stanley Cohen, that lawyer I'm just talking about, who will figure into this in a bit, don't like me and hate me, and how I am indeed guilty of credit card theft, and that this was widely known, which of course, the credit card charges were dropped by the DOJ. Even no one believed this. Not even the DOJ believed it, and no one, even only the DOJ and a few other people who turned out to be FBI cooperators, even believed this. Even claimed it. And so this is conversation. I received this conversation a few months ago, but I didn't get around to reading it and realizing what it was until like a couple of weeks back. And when I did, a lot of things clicked about Peter Thiel, Omidyar, Glenn Greenwald, Weave, and so forth. And what this is Andrew Arnheimer, Weave. Andrew Arnheimer is his name. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's German, so screw it. He's not yet the head of the Daily Stormer. He's not yet the admin for Daily Stormer. He's not yet a well-known Nazi figure, but he is a known kind of piece of shit and all that. But is inexplicably retains friendships with a lot of people in the community, including Larry Love here, up until 2017 when he was finally told by people, by my fiance actually, Sylvia Mann, like to you need to stop. You need to stop doing this neo-Nazi. And this gets into something else I'm going to have to go into. It's going to be difficult because it involves just, some poor judgments that have been made. Anyway, this is Mercedes Heifer being approached by Weave on behalf of Pierre Omidyar, who it becomes clear very, very early on here is also dealing with Peter Thiel.
Now, people who don't know, Pierre Omidyar is the guy who started the Intercept. He worked with Jesse Ventura, right? I mean, this guy's a billionaire, right? Just like Peter Thiel is a billionaire.
Yeah. And the other thing about Omidyar that was a problem for him is that he was already known to have ties to the intelligence community, and he was already known to have tweeted out and said stuff about how these whistleblowers or traitors and should be prosecuted. So that made things really awkward for Omidyar and Greenwald and everybody else who was ready to get this $500 million startup outlet. And again, I want to make clear, I don't know and would love to know, but he won't answer my questions anymore. As is the case with most of these people that we're talking about. I would love to know what Greenwald knew and what he didn't know. And maybe we'll never know, but I have a feeling that we'll learn more. I've gotten more of Greenwald's, I protected Greenwald. He was one of the ones targeted by that Themis thing that Thiel's company went after. I've worked for Greenwald. We'll get that in a second. And I've gone after Greenwald pretty fiercely for the last several years, ever since.
You've gone after him, but at one point he was your hero, right?
He was just like Julian Assange. He was my hero, and I knew him before the anonymous stuff. The article I wrote about Hastings defending him for Vanity Fair, Greenwald, on his blog, he posted that, and we struck up correspondence and he helps defend Hastings too from the criticisms he was getting. And him and Andrew Sullivan, and it was to me it was tremendous that I got to talk to him. He was my hero.
I think he's a lot of our heroes. I mean, I thought absolutely. He was great back then too. Now I'm absolutely shocked at what I see.
Yep. And there's more to that, of course. Anyway, so this conversation is essentially Pierre Omidyar and Peter Thiel. They've now gotten control of Weave. Weave reveals here that he's known Omidyar for a while. He met him through someone. He doesn't say who it was. It's quite, there's some possibilities I'm not going to go into because it's not that important right now. I know some people who were at some parties that occurred in 2013, 2014, and so we can probably figure out exactly who made that, who gave Weave to Omidyar. But then we also see Weave here attesting that he has a meeting tomorrow with Peter Thiel's right-hand man. I don't know who that would refer to. at that point. And we don't have to take Weave's word for it, luckily, because a few years ago, Ryan Mack of BuzzFeed, who I've been a source for on Thiel in the past, as I have for a couple of other journalists and for Thiel's biographer, he and his partner, I forgot the name of the other journalist, they found documents and so forth showing that Peter Thiel had indeed been backing Weave financially for years. Just to reiterate, backing him for years, going on to probably the present day. This is years during which Weave is running the Daily Stormer. This is during which Weave is right here telling the PayPal 14, as sort of led by Mercedes, the one who was most photogenic. It wasn't a photogenic bunch, so she got to be in the documentaries and stuff that we were on, like We Are Legion. Here he is telling her that these attacks, these criticisms of what they refer to as the PayPal mafia, that's Weave's terms, other people's terms too, Pierre Omidyar and Peter Thiel and a few others, just to back off them, to stop attacking them. And if you have to read the whole thing, because he goes through different iterations of threats, implied threats, and carrots. There's carrots and sticks here. And I didn't know about this, and I would have loved to have known about this. And I really would, and I really very much wonder what Stanley Cohen, the lawyer I got for Mercedes, and who kind of fronted a lot of this and got a lot of clout as a result of his, involvements in all these things. I would like to know if he learned about it. I would like to know, who Mercedes told and when, how long this has been floating around. I have had people like Joe Fionda, again, who I mentioned, very solid guy who's been on top of a lot of this, and who, of course, has been, like a lot of us, has been suspended from Twitter over it.
He's commenting now. Joe just commented.
Oh,
Peter Thiel, right-hand man equals Jeff something,
so,
Daily Stormer contributor.
Yeah. So Joe Fionda is somebody who he is one of several people that know where a lot of the bodies are buried in terms of all of this stuff. I mean, including Ukraine, Russia, the U.S., anonymous. I mean, he's encyclopedic knowledge of a number of these issues, including stuff that I don't. And he would be able to he'd make a great guest, number one, for the future, and number two, he is a vastly important source of information, which is why he's brought up in that FBI recording I talked about, the FBI meeting. Anyway, so what we have here is what happened on a larger scale in a way that I'm just now in the last year coming to understand. To Anonymous, to WikiLeaks and around it, to the transparency activist community, to everything that could have been that was a potential threat to Thiel and to the FBI and to the CIA and so forth, and their converging interests, which is that either they were attacked, either they were co-opted, either they were dissuaded, or they were conned, they were sent, by somebody they liked, they were, paid.
I think that
whatever you can see all kinds of iterations here, into becoming part of what amounts to the Dark Enlightenment, Peter Thiel influence network. The Dark Enlightenment, we used that term earlier. I want people should look it up later. Peter Thiel didn't coin the term, but he wrote an essay on it, and it is a neo-feudalistic, technocratic, anti-democratic philosophy that appeals to a lot of people who are like kind of intelligent. And kind of understand like the issues with democracy, which is a lot of people, mostly white, and it is it's a thing that has, it is. Oh no, it's a when light.
Did I spell it wrong? How do you spell that?
You're one of those words. It's one of those words where it could go wrong at any time. So
how do I spell this? Yeah, it's telling me actually.
I mean, your computer tell you?
It does usually, but it's not.
Okay, well, it's ENLIGHTMENTENT. Enlightenment.
I thought I had that right then. I don't know.
You almost did. You just left out two letters. Anyway.
Oh, I see. Enlighten. EN.
So the other thing that's very telling about this particular exchange and this incident, aside from the fact that I have no knowledge of it, there's a couple things. One is that Mercedes Heifer's lawyer, Stanley Cohen, is, aside from associated with Stanley Heifer back then, Mercedes Heifer, is now a lawyer for a lot of people at DDoS. And a lot of people have surrounded him, and is also someone that has recently blocked me as well, just like Iranon News did. Called me a snitch without going into details, and also, was found to be putting out this information about me publicly back in 2013, 2014, and privately for reasons I don't understand. I even asked about when I got out of prison because people pointed out to me. It was really weird. Stanley Cohen plays a major part in the infiltration and co-option of what I call the transparency activist movement, anonymous, WikiLeaks, blah blah, and my groups. And so among the people that as you can see at the end of this conversation, Mercedes agrees to change the statement, and I haven't had a chance. Someone should probably go and take a look and try to figure out more about specifically what was said and all that. And someone should track down Mercedes and a lot of other people. But of course, again, as I've said before, most people aren't talking. A situation I'm more than used to dealing with, and more than happy to deal with, as Drag House knows now. And the next person that we know of to have been co-opted to be used by Peter Thiel to do damage to transparency, to the public knowledge, and to entrap and destroy activists. The next person who was recruited to do that was me. I was the Intercept. Greenwald had me column from prison after my sentencing. I've been writing a column for D Magazine, my hometown city paper, city magazine, that had gotten very popular. Prison, it was being retweeted by people from Monty Python, but John Cusack, lots of media people already, even though it was on a blog on a local city website, because I do my best writing in prison. And he offered me a job writing for the Intercept, and $2,000 a column, a month. So I was making more money there in prison than I ever had in my life, because I've never been financially very successful, even and I had not, even aside from the drug addiction stuff, that even if I was stone cold sober, I would still not be a very financially sound person. But anyway, the purpose of having me, and I got to tell you this about Greenwald. The last emails I sent to Greenwald after I was raided by the FBI and before I went to prison, were just saying, hey man, just other journalists are being targeted. This USA Today reporter got targeted by this company. It's an intelligence contractor. They went after him in these weird ways, and this stuff's going to happen a lot, and it's going to be a big problem. And persona management, these social network bots, and Palantir, these things are very dangerous. And someone's got to to attend to them. And I'm going to prison, and so I can't. So please, and I've published these emails since then. And they're on my Medium account, and I'll post a link in my Twitter account. Never got a reply. Remember, this is a guy I've been talking to for years. Anyway, and he didn't say a word after I was raided. Didn't say a word after I was arrested. It wasn't until a few months after that, when Kevin Gallagher, who's now dead, and Lauren Pespiza, who brought me on the show here, it was with Project PM, went and lobbied him, and basically, as they were helping, and Michael Hastings were helping to get me better known, make people understand what my case was about. That it wasn't about me threatening to kill an FBI agent, that obviously something had preceded that, Michael Hastings, had posted my search warrant, in BuzzFeed. Didn't matter. A lot of people didn't know when I was arrested, just didn't understand what it was that I've been investigating, and why it was this was happening, and why it was that my mom was being threatened to begin with, and why I thus threatened the FBI agent back. But as that became better understood, after I was charged with the Stratford stuff, Kevin and Lauren and others were able to get, they got Glenn Greenwald, and went and had dinner with him. It's a picture of him. And he wrote an article for The Guardian about me, and that obviously helped quite a bit. But again, that was not until it became useful and, popular to support me. Because there was a period there, between my arrest in September 2012 and a few months later, when the DOJ made a big mistake and charged me over Stratford, where the notion was written about, you can still see articles claiming I was a hacker, best known for article on Reuters by Joseph Min, actually, the guy I talked about is now at the Washington Post, the one who also conned Kevin Gallagher into giving him a portion of my manuscript to my upcoming book. Something that I then had to talk with. I mean, anyway, there was a lot of articles.
What? Because I want to know when is your book coming out? Because I want to read this.
So now it looks like it's been pushed back over and over again. There's been obviously overtaken by events. I mean, it would have been a totally different book if it came out 3 years ago. So it's good that's been pushed back. A lot of it is because of situations I was in. I was homeless for a while. I was in a relationship with someone with borderline personality disorder, which is very difficult. And I kind of got chased out of my hometown, the bomb threats and all that, and was running things. And we're just not able to do it. And then I turned in a version when I got to Antigua, and felt safe adding some other stuff now, some other sensitive stuff. And then they had me redo a final version, and I believe I turned that in about a month and a half ago. It looks like, from what I saw the other day, that it will come out in January this coming year. So, and it'll be a portion of the story, a portion of it. It should be enough, I think. And the screenplay, the movie, which we're doing with Alex Winter, hopefully that will be enough. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take, but we'll just keep doing whatever. Everything from threatening Greg House to putting out movies, as always, by whatever means necessary. Anyway. Yeah, and
we're getting a lot of. It's funny. I've been
who know some stuff, and there's a lot of people who know a lot about this some stuff. I mean, Joe Fionda is some. I don't know who this one is. If it's another.
I don't know who.
Or
I hit the wrong one sometimes. It's fine.
It might be. Well, I won't name the person just if they don't want to be named. But it's anyway. I mean, Joe Fionda, like I said, that's someone who knows everything about everything from Russian intelligence, Ukrainian oligarchs, to Boris Johnson's sexual proclivities, and the some of his still unknown scandals involving a hackerspace, in the UK. I mean, he's been around for a lot of things. Again, me and him, kind of like Forrest Gump in certain ways, except, some of this is our fault. We didn't just stumble into the history. In some cases we chased it, and then it chased us. Anyway, so I was hired by the Intercept. I did not know who Pierre Omidyar was. Certainly didn't know about his intelligence connections, and a lot of those were still hidden until later on. And Tim Sharrock, who's a friend of mine, who did a great book on Booz Allen Hamilton a few years before Snowden came out, who was a Booz Allen Hamilton employee, and put it on the map. And in a year before, me and Project PM, discovered Booz Allen Hamilton going after some people and wrote about them and all that. He wrote the book on them. He was very a pioneer in looking into the private intelligence sector and how the NSA uses it as an extension of itself. He's written a great article on Pierre Omidyar's the additional intelligence connections he has. So anyway, I was hired and was happily writing columns for what I thought was a dream job, writing under Greenwald's leadership, and some editors they brought on from Harper's and so forth, and other places. And, I didn't know, there's a lot I still didn't know about a lot of things, probably because I was in prison, and there's a limited degree of ability to kind of notice things. You don't know what to ask about. And so I didn't know John Cook was the first editor. John Cook is a guy, Gawker. He's one of the people. I have a recording of me calling him couple of years back, and or about a year ago, and him saying, "Oh, hey, Barrett, got to go," and hanging up. He's one of the people who was caught working with the FBI against activists, including myself and others. He was the first editor, which is at the Intercept, where John Cook is someone who should not be near any publication, much less one dealing with whistleblower documents. And I didn't know that the Intercept was hiring Sam Biddle. I think who's the only person. Only journalist in any outlet of any notes to celebrate my sentencing, and who was also involved in helping to make that happen. He wrote an article in conjunction with several known professed FBI cooperators, blaming Anonymous for things that I can show were done by FBI cooperators to each other. It was the most bizarre thing ever, and I now actually have the correspondence between him and those FBI cooperators, and between him and me, because he reached out to me about the article. I wrote him like 10 pages in response explaining, hey, be careful, this person works for HB Gary and has admitted it, and didn't mention a thing about that, didn't use it, didn't want it. Didn't know he was working there. Certainly didn't know that, my street cred as a whistleblower and activist who was willing to go 100 years, let his mom be taken down if necessary. Someone who was really militant about this, that I was being used to give street cred and deniability to something that would then attract more and more whistleblowers to send stuff. And so I certainly didn't know that Reality Winner, a few years hence, when she found documents about Trump and Russia and sent him the intercept, I certainly didn't know that those documents would be handled by Sam Biddle, that's the guy I just got done talking about, who has longtime FBI connections, and who was also on the horrible men in media list that was being thrown around during the Me Too movement. Didn't know he would be handling those documents and bylined on the article that came out right when Reality Winner was arrested. Didn't know the guy that John Kiriakou correctly blames for selling him out to the FBI. Didn't know he would be working on those same documents. I certainly didn't know that a person who now, as of during the Black Lives Matter protests, like the big ones in 2020, took a new job as the spokesperson for the NYPD, certainly didn't know he was working at the Intercept and was bylined on that story with those documents.
That is bizarro. Think about that. So,
and here's the really bizarre thing about this. And here's the thing that here's the reason. Quite frankly, I'm now very open about this whole conflict will involve, if necessary, and it is, this will involve a lot of things as they become necessary. Because it's been several years since I pointed out some of this stuff. The Intercept had a 5th anniversary. I quit the Intercept when I got out of prison. And then my column moved to Vice, and then Vice published one, and then inexplicably did not reply to me again. And this is a column that I won the National Magazine Award for this column. I won the National Writer, or the New York Writers Guild Award for it, and runner-up for the National Journalist Guild, and blah blah. This was a column that was worth having, and Vice printed the first one, and then I guess someone there, maybe the one from the State Department, said, "Oh no, you don't run this guy." We can find out. I guess we can talk to the editors there. I've tried several times to ask them, and I'll name them as soon as I remember their names.
And we know they try to go after your money too. I mean, that's another thing they've been harassing.
Oh, the money. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. The Intercept got a subpoena. Yeah, the Intercept got a subpoena. My publisher got a subpoena. The subpoena just wasn't
just harassment. I mean, this is harassing the media.
Yeah.
Basically what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's funny because, of course, the Intercept, that's the thing, is the Intercept, even if you're sort of a creature of the private intelligence community and have these links to the FBI and DOJ, not everyone is aware of this. And so, so I think the DOJ people that sent that subpoena demanding all my communications with the Intercept, from prison, including, I had a prison email deal, and since, including my financial records, I don't think they knew that they could just pass Pierre Omidyar, again, having said that, I do think some of the editors there who would be involved in that, would have not complied. Some of them are guilty. Some of the editors there, as internal reports that the Intercept commissioned, have shown, and that Greenwald kept quiet about. There was some major poor judgments made by some of the editors there. They're still, I guess, they're still there in terms of the Reality Winner thing and other things. So, but anyway, so the Intercept was subpoenaed, and my publisher was subpoenaed, and I was also prevented for about 10 months by the DOJ from getting any income because they had to figure out my restitution to Stratford. And then we had to get lawyers involved to figure it out. Anyway, I left the U.S. At some point after that, but and I have no bank account, which is convenient. Obviously, yeah. So I didn't know anything about the Intercept. I didn't know enough about Greenwald. I didn't know that Greenwald, that I didn't know about Omidyar. I didn't know that I was essentially part of a honey trap, and that I'm partly responsible by virtue of that. I don't know to what extent, by winning them their first awards and all that. I don't know if that matters in terms of what it attracted. I don't know, if it led, either Daniel Hale, who was prosecuted after winning the Intercept, or Reality Winner. I don't know if it helped to maybe not. I mean, maybe it was enough that Snowden and Greenwald were involved, and blah blah. And Laura Poitras is a great person who has been very involved in getting out the truth about the intercept the last couple of years, including leaking me some documents, internal documents there that I then leaked. She was the one that Snowden originally came to, and that she teamed with Greenwald. Anyway, I didn't know all this stuff, and this is a great opportunity to remind everyone, including people that I'm going to be reaching out to. In some cases for the second time, in some cases for the first time. There's no shame, in being tricked, even if you made a bad judgment call. There's no shame in having blood on your hands. There's no shame in having worked accidentally for something terrible. I've done it. And I did it from prison on behalf of the agenda of a person who put me in prison. The column was still funny, I'm glad that, and I'm glad I wrote it.
It was a great column.
I wish I could, other than the counterpunch, I really don't have many outlets that will run anything by me or mention me these days, because I have been pretty vicious about the press stuff I've discovered. But the Intercept it was named the Intercept for a reason. Same kind of thing we do on our side with Anonymous, where we give things some inside joke names and stuff. It's a form of power, kind of. It's a form of
right in your face.
Ritualistic. Yeah,
it's like right in your face. Mind war. Going back to mind wars, info wars. This is all what it is. It's. So too, you get the info and present it to people, and this is what they don't like. I mean, we hear this all the time in the right-wing media sphere, where they prop up people like Alex Jones who are bullshit artists. They never give you any information. You actually deliver the information. You name names, you show instances, you show their emails, you go through. I mean, we've been doing this for 2 hours, and I don't even think we've cracked 1/10 of what you've provided. So if people have questions.
So people understand that the environment we live in, there's a reason that I went from winning those National Magazine Awards and being interviewed. I mean, being covered every time. I took a bath one time on webcam during a press conference to make a point, because supposedly the Zetas were to come kill me, and I didn't think that was the case. So their article outlets, everyone that reported on that and everything else I did for years in the awards, there's a reason that none of them are going to mention stuff I put out, and there's a reason that I increasingly do things through proxies, and even they have a hard time with it. I'm not saying everyone who's successful in journalism, like very successful, is bad or on the take, because that's not true. I know a bunch I still deal with at several outlets that are still successful and are doing the right thing in a difficult environment. And there's some at the Intercept I've spoken to recently, that I'm disappointed in, because they have the ability to say these same things, because they're not being prosecuted, they're not being chased around the world, they're not under an asylum claim, they're not subjected to. I mean, their friends aren't dying, after being harassed by people who have carte blanche, and they have a little bit more opportunity than I do, and time perhaps, to put these things out, but they don't, and that's a disappointment. But I still talk to some of them, and there are great journalists out there working for all the outlets that are problematic. I use problematic in the term probably should be destroyed. I don't use it in the usual term. There's people at New York Times who are doing great work, so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, in almost no case will you find journalists who are willing, if they're shown that their outlet or others of their outlet are doing something of the exact opposite of what journalists should do, and if you show them the evidence of that, the odds of them blowing the whistle, as it were, doing the right thing, based on my experience, which has been extensive in the last few years, as I've gone through and confronted editors at all these outlets and journalists, the odds are slim.
It's like the cops. Slim. It's like the blue.
That's exactly what I said. Exactly.
Media.
And that's
media. If you work for New York Times, you're not going to go against someone else from New York Times.
That's the frightening thing, is because people understand. I can make someone who does understand, for some reason, I can make them understand why cops can't be trusted to police themselves, why they pick their buddies. I can make people understand why the military will do that, or When someone's livelihood and self and belief in their self and their role in society and public image is at stake, it becomes very difficult to understand things all of a sudden. And so again, we have diplomacy for a reason, and we have war for a reason. We have polite debates and discussions, disagreements for a reason, and we have me putting out correspondence that will, end careers for a reason. My preference is always that these things be dealt with honestly and quickly and openly in a way that it helps the public. But again, as someone who, as I've said, I've been through it all, and I've lost friends in this. I'm going to be perhaps more active and more present and more public in the months to come, until such time as I feel that the tide has turned, because this omerta in the press and some of the NGOs and all that is too much, and that again, that applies to everyone. It applies to every single person I know, So
I hope you keep it up.
Hopefully we'll know more soon about this. So we haven't gotten yet to, I guess we could quickly talk about Andy No and Peter Thiel and Roger and Rogan, if we have time. I don't know how much.
We got a few minutes.
So I didn't care about Joe Rogan at all. Didn't know very much about him when I got out of prison, or even when the scandal was going on. I saw a bunch of people. You can actually see on the Joe Rogan fan Reddit subreddit. You can see it on YouTube. If you look up my name, Joe Rogan, tons of people were suggesting to his producers and among each other, like, "Oh, have on Barrett Brown. He's the type of guest." And I knew one thing about Joe Rogan pretty soon within getting out, which is that one of his repeated guests was Eric Weinstein, head of Thiel Capital.
Yes.
And I knew that to be suspicious because, number one, he's head of a capital investment firm. He's not a charismatic guy, not an interesting guy. He's not even a racist guy. He's going to say interesting racist stuff. He has none of the things that would make a Joe Rogan, make a Joe Rogan guest. But like a lot of people that we've now gone back and found lists of who've gotten their start with Joe Rogan in some part, like Andy No. Eric Weinstein is a big part of the Thiel network. So it wasn't until, so again, I don't get involved in these things where the issue is that, a white guy is using the N-word in a different context, just not, and neither, a lot of the real militant black groups that I work with, again, there's, that is, at the risk of sounding, the risk of being prejudiced, that's white girl shit right there. The real things that are happening to the black community. Yes, certainly that, these kind of things that, normalizing behavior, these are things to be addressed, but there's a pecking order of things that are important and need to be stopped. And top of that pecking order is facilitating a Nazi neo-influence network that involves, that centers on Peter Thiel, someone who advocates for the dark enlightenment, and extends to Weave, the neo-Nazi head of Daily Stormer for years, who has a secret base in the Eastern Europe, funded by Thiel. Thiel, a person who got Trump into office. Thiel, a person who was instrumental via Palantir in the ICE raids. That is what needs to be talked about. And I saw the Joe Rogan thing as an opportunity to get that talked about. And of course, I failed to get that accomplished. And so it's kind of gone away. And then the funny thing is I was writing up a document and circulating it around among some colleagues and so forth, and tweeted out something that one morning about, here's the real Joe Rogan scandal. So the real Joe Rogan scandal is coming. And I'd spent a busy day compiling all the connections I could think of, the close connections between Thiel and Joe Rogan and the rest of the network there, showing that Joe Rogan is a creature of Thiel. There's Eric Weinstein's appearances. There's obviously the fact that someone like me would not be brought on on an anti-establishment show when, not to toot my own horn, but I used to go on everything, back in the day. And, I am known as someone who would be a interesting guest, especially if you're dealing with conspiracies and or unusual stuff, or other comedians, because I'm a humorist, I was a humorist before I was anything else. So that was, a little suspicious. But anyway, compiling his connections to Andy No, which is what brought this to my attention. Someone showed me a tweet that Andy Ngo put out saying, praising Joe Rogan, saying, back when I had no voice and I just been assaulted by Antifa and my brain hemorrhaging, all this whole thing he conned the New York Times and everybody into running. Back when I had no voice, no influence, just a guy, Joe Rogan reached out and put me on. And he's a great guy. And that's when I sat up and said, oh, shit. Now I remember some things. And one of the things I remembered was a Politico article from 2019, a little bit naive, but it was about the intellectual dark web, which is an overlapping thing with the dark enlightenment. It's the more well-known term that the New York Times actually came up with. Barry Weiss, who's also part of the Thiel network, coined it in this big feature article about all the dark the intellectual dark web thinkers, and they've gone underground because they're being suppressed. And a lot of them have Thiel connections. Anyway, I remember this profile on Claire Lamont, who is the editor of Quillette. Quillette is an outlet that runs and has run for a long time Peter Thiel op-eds by Peter Thiel. Runs articles by Claire Lamont himself, like defending Peter Thiel, and stuff that no one else is talking about, that Peter Thiel obviously, urges about. Andy Ngo was their employee until it was discovered. It came out by a video. His actual role in the incident where a bunch of Patriot Prayer groups and other white supremacists went down, plans to go make an attack on a left-wing bar, and did so, and a woman got paralyzed. That came out, and he quit that same day, unrelated, according to him and Claire Lamont. Just was planned coincidence. Anyway, so I remembered that Politico article and how the first paragraph began talking about Claire Lamont meets with Eric. They go out with Eric Weinstein of Thiel Capital, and they meet up with Joe Rogan. And suddenly I realized, I think I have a pretty good idea how Andy Ngo got onto Joe Rogan's show, and I think I got a pretty good idea as to some other things. I already had a pretty good idea of why Andy Ngo had been targeting me and had identified me for the UK police and worked with the Met and the Met Federation, the police union here, to get me arrested successfully, and identified me as a Antifa leader, which is not true. I mean, I'm an anti-fascist, but I'm an anti-fascist. Like my grandfather was an anti-fascist. Like, I think we should drop bombs on them, and he did. That was a different time. I'm old-fashioned, and I already understood why Claire Lamont had gotten my Twitter account suspended several times. There's an article about that because I do have the world record for permanent suspensions on Twitter that have been then reversed after outcries by the journalists. And eventually, anyway, so I already had a good idea about that, and I already had an idea individually of why I knew from the start and said as much. Rogan's not going to be heavy on that show. I don't know how we know. It occurred to me, this network extends pretty widely. Wow. And so I said this around to some journalists and all that. And a few hours later, it came out that Peter Thiel, who I was trying desperately to draw the connections to Rogan through all these people, offers Joe Rogan $100 million to come on to his network, Rumbler, which Greenwald is also involved in. And, that makes things both harder and easier. It makes it easier to show he's beginning of Thiel, but it makes it harder to point out to people that, some of this stuff was kind of concealed. And if you look at I've had some people go and look at the guest lists, including some people who are very prolific researchers and data analysts, for major outlets. Boy, there's some interesting patterns there that go beyond that. But the bottom line is Joe Rogan is a creature of Thiel. Tim Pool is a creature of Thiel. We know that through Rocco Castoro and Emily Molly, who are now being sued by Tim Pool. They were hired, to help him create this outlet that he was getting funding from, almost certainly from Thiel. They took the job knowing that if they didn't take it, someone else would, and they knew that they could use it. They could use it in ways that Tim Pool was not going to like, and that's exactly what happened. And they could also find out what Tim Pool was up to, and that happened. And they could also fund me using Palantir's money, which also happened as well. They were able to Rocco was arranging to give me a show on this new network, Disrupt, or whatever, I can't remember what it's called now, the Tim Pool's deal, and they were using that money, Palantir's money, Peter Thiel's money, to pay for my Airbnbs in Austin when I was homeless and so forth. And so that was nice to get one back at him. Anyway, we know all about it. And so they ended up being sued by Tim Pool, and they've released the Capitol footage that Tim Pool was trying to suppress. They've released information about Tim Pool's foreknowledge and involvement in planning the Capitol riots, and a lot of other stuff. Rocco Castoro, who works closely with me and Joe Fiondo on things, he's another encyclopedia of press malfeasance and much else. He knows where the bodies are buried. He had a long interview with McAfee, for instance, before he died. That was never published. That's another person that, over the last year, 2 years, working with him and so forth, we've been able to get a better sense.
I want to ask you about what was the McAfee real quick, because it's funny. You remember how I just basically, for the audience, when I asked Barrett to come on the show, I thought of another show that I listened to that I thought he might go on, and I hit up that host, the Opperman report, and the host sent me back. He said he was going to send me this crazy interview he did with McAfee. So now I'm like, what's going on with McAfee? Like, so I thought he was a nutbag. What was that all about?
So I'll tell you this. So Rocco, we interviewed him on his island a number of years ago, and he's released some clips of that since then, and that's a whole other subject. I interacted with McAfee publicly when I got out of prison. When I was building up funding for pursuance, I tweeted at him and said, "Hey, give me money for my fucking nonprofit." I said so on Twitter. And I think he said, "Oh, if the project has merit, it'll get funding automatically." And I said, "That's not true. You know that." And then I said, "I'm going to use my psychic powers to spy on you in whatever room you are, unless you give me money." And because I like to mess with people who are wacky. And McAfee, of course, also knew where a lot of bodies were buried. And there's a direction there that I'll pass on talking about now, because I'm not the person to do it. But anyway, later on, he did actually help me out. He did fund me for a while through it. Yeah, I got some McAfee money at some point, not a lot, not the kind that Andy Ngo or Weave get from Peter Thiel or and not the kind that the Atomwaffen lady that Andy Ngo works with, the one who does Atomwaffen porn, also running that XC Intel firm, not that kind of money, but I got I think maybe $1,000 or something, and we put it into Pursuance nonprofit to help keep that running before I shut it down, which I eventually did. McAfee, yeah, that's another person that we'll never really know the extent to which what his role was at the Intelligence Committee and how this may relate to Epstein. I'll put it that way.
That's funny, because that's what's his name, Opperman's. That's probably where it goes, because Opperman
there are
was way ahead on Epstein. He got that way before anyone else.
Yeah, I've worked with and been involved with one of the journalists who at the Miami Herald Tribune that re-entered, that basically got the Epstein story back into the public eye and forced the DOJ to finally do what they did and led to all this. And Val Brooksmith, the one I talked about, the one who ended up doing a deal and snitching on us, he also worked with the New York Times on that issue afterwards, and so forth. And so between us and Rocco, and of course Val is now our enemy because he turned.
He turned.
Turned. But I mean, there's a lot of information there that it would be great if a real outlet that's not me and has more resources and more time,
right,
to focus on, to pursue, because goddamn, that's another great example of the press is the problem of the press and the public. I'm very glad the term influence network is now in use, because now it's possible to talk intelligently about basic obvious things, like there are networks of people that influence things, and they can be used in different ways without being say, oh, it's a conspiracy. And so I'm glad
when you mentioned Joe Rogan too, I've always looked at the Alex Jones, that he's within an influence program. There's something going on with that guy forever.
I met Alex Jones and interviewed him in 2002. I lived in Austin at the time. He was very much a novelty. We loved watching his show because he's so funny, and some of the stuff he did was interesting. He did go to Bohemian Grove and film it. He exaggerated about what was going on there, but Bohemian Grove is a real thing. It's legitimate. It's unfortunately it's tarnished by him and other people, so it doesn't get looked into as deeply as it should, like the Bilderberg Group. But I interviewed him, and in the company of a friend of mine, Mirna Hariz, who's also a friend of mine from Dallas, way back, very close friend, and he was Lebanese. And when I walked off to go get a camera, so I could take a picture of me and Alex Jones, as one of my souvenirs from my travails through fucking the descent of America, the end of the United States. He said some things to her that were quite anti-Semitic, assuming she would agree. Like, the Jews and all that, I wish I had recorded it, but it doesn't really matter. The thing about Alex Jones is, I'll just say this, for years and years, he was accusing Rudy Giuliani of involvement in 9/11. Mm-hmm. Then I got out of prison, and I see that Alex Jones is now, he's now friends with him and Trump. And so either he changed his mind, or he didn't believe it to begin with, or or Rudy Giuliani used his cunning, personal charisma to. I don't know what's going on there.
It's crazy. That's crazy. How you're right. He switched. It's like WWE.
Well, that's the least of it.
It's what it reminds me of WWE, when a good guy turns into a bad guy, and like now
it's a great reminder. It's a great reminder of people should never. They should never. Don't assume that supposed enemies, people who are apparent enemies, don't assume that it's bizarre. Especially after the last 5 years of realignments, it should be clear. Don't be like, that's ridiculous if someone proposes, or provides you evidence, of alliances between, so forth. Because remember, I worked for Peter Thiel without realizing it, and that's just one minor example. Mm-hmm. And I helped promote Kurtaner, Aubrey Cottle, because I didn't like him. He was obviously a nut even when I brought him in. But I, didn't. I told him off a couple of times because he kept talking about crazy shit. And I told him, shut the fuck up. No one cares about your feelings. But I, and I ignored. Anyway, what I'm saying is that, there are strange bedfellows. And and Glenn Greenwald being targeted by Peter Thiel, us discovering it, putting it out, Greenwald writing about it, after they got lying, and then years later, aligning with Peter Thiel and Joe Rogan and the whole network, and promote and retweeting. The other things Greenwald's been doing is retweeting someone who's get money from the Founders Fund, one of Thiel's other pieces of his apparatus. It just goes on and on. That's a great example. That everything's changeable, and a lot of people can be bought, and it's very easy to convince people that they should take the money, because taking the money would be helpful and all that. Very easy to convince them, especially in this day and age. That is why we're in the situation we're in, and that is why the response, the solution to all of this, will not be through, unfortunately, the proper channels, the press and the public having a discussion and then voting, Congress voting. It's not. We are already in the middle of a civil war that's transnational, and this is part of it. Speaking of that,
yes,
we probably should end soon. I guess I'm sure you're tired.
Yeah. You must be. You're up to what is it, like 1 a.m. now?
But I keep a regular sleeping habits. I'll say this about Russia and Ukraine. So, like I said, I started going to Russia today. Back in 2010, I was invited on to defend Michael Hastings for my Vanity Fair article. I went on to defend Aaron Schwartz the day he was indicted. Even though I didn't even remember I'd worked with him at that point. I still did not remember him being the one that had done this DDoS deal. So we dealt with a lot of people, and they're all, I went on to talk about the things we discovered that were really dangerous to democracy. I was happy to use the Russian propaganda networks to put out true things, because if I'm not on there putting out these, first of all, it needs to get out. It needs to get out to the Western public and everyone. And again, I have no problem using someone else's apparatus. If I can if the CIA said, "Hey, we're going to give you an interview on whatever networks we fund," I'd be like, "Sure, that's great. I'll do that." I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to not point out things that I know about you, but I'll do that. Same thing with Russia Today. Sputnik is the only one I actually stopped going on entirely, because anyway. That's not even really well hidden arm of the Russian intelligence community. Anyway, something I need to make known, because this is important, and this gives us a sense of what the position a lot of us are going to be in, and why we have to start thinking about these things. My last ever interview with Russia Today was last Monday, a few days before the Ukrainian invasion. It was one of several outlets and individuals that have been reaching out to me about things I've been talking about regarding Anonymous being infiltrated by the CIA and the intelligence community, about Aubrey Cottle, things we talked about here today. And I've been putting out all this stuff, and was happy to put it out again to an audience, to people who watch Russia Today still, like, in the English-speaking world. There's a lot of them are people who really need to. They need to be told certain things. There's things they probably don't understand. If they, Russia Today has had some great hosts and put out great information, but it's kind of a piece of shit. I know a lot of ex-producers there. But the interview that I had on that Monday, it was unlike all the last 20 interviews I've done with them. It's entirely unlike it for a number of reasons. And I recorded it, the whole thing, using Skype on my end. It was an hour long. That was one of the unusual things. It was not done with a presenter, like one of the very famously attractive women they usually have. It wasn't live. Usually they're not always live. Sometimes they're recorded and used later. And it turned out at the very end, it turned out from a question I asked, it wasn't with a producer. And it doesn't seem like they've aired any of it, even though they have put out pieces on the same subject. If they have aired any of it, it's probably being done internally in Russia, on Russian networks of me. And so it's me explaining the same stuff I've been saying to the public. But the person I was talking to, and this is well known, you should talk. Andrew Blake would be a great guy to ask about this, or Joe Fionda, or many others. The Russian nationals who work at Russia Today, they're Russian intelligence. They're not just part of the influence network they have. They are Russian intelligence. The person I spoke to, this happened once with the Israelis back in 2011 too. Recorded that one as well. This was definitely, and I didn't realize it until the end. This was the Russians asking me about the CIA's infiltration, the CIA's involvement in Anonymous and distributed denial of secrets and all the things that, and I didn't realize at the time why they're interested in that. I mean, they ask about Anonymous. They want stuff about CIA and FBI infiltration, wrongdoing, of course, and so we have that shared interest. And I didn't realize until the invasion started, and Anonymous, the portions of Anonymous that exist, the Euronaut news account basically leads it essentially in terms of impact and press power, and Kurtaner and all these other networks. I didn't realize that they were going to be, popping in and going after the Russians in a digital attack method. So the information I gave them, which they could have found. They could have found all of it. I mean, I've given you more information than I have to them because we've had longer to talk. But I mean, it's all there on my Twitter account. That's how they knew about it. But they were using me as a means of being able to be in a position to discredit the operation against Russia being done by Anonymous. So there's several implications here, and this is a great way to end the show, I think. There's a lot of reasons not to deceive people people who are working on your behalf or for you, or under your guidance. There's a lot of reasons not to get in bed with the CIA, FBI, and all that. Even if, say, for instance, like Emma Best and her partner Zan North, even if they are facing indictments and they don't want to go to prison because they're cowards. There's a lot of reasons not to take those deals. And there's a lot of reasons why, Stanley Cohen, who's heavily involved in this, whatever this takeover has been, and the other people who infiltrated the pre-anons, the non-legal defense people in a group, with my help, unfortunately. There's a reason, why the things they have done, to the extent they believe in what they're doing, are not well assisted by their actions. It's never good to be in a position where the truth will discredit you. And that's one thing. And that's a pragmatic thing. There's other pragmatic reasons not to work with CIA and FBI, not to work with Weave, neo-Nazi, and Peter Thiel and Kurtaner and all these people at once, and have FBI cooperators running around and then attack and try to discredit and try to get swats on those of us who have pointed this stuff out, gradually, as Kurtaner and them tried to do to me and my fiance a few months ago. And there's reasons not to do a lot of the things they've done, and they're pragmatic and moral. And the fact of the matter is, it would have been the easiest fucking thing in the world had things gone differently for a real movement with integrity that polices itself, that doesn't decide it's beyond policing itself like the police do, like the press does, the governments do. There are reasons not to go down that road, unless you were a coward or could be bought. In which case, it's very important that we know who you are, so that you can be exposed and your influence minimized, and then down the road, whatever happens. But bottom line is, the Russians knew this, the CIA knew this, the public doesn't know it. And so I think if the Russian intelligence services know something and the U.S. intelligence services know something, the public needs to know it as well. And they can decide for themselves. Again, I'm not saying don't participate in these anonymous-led attacks on Russia. Do it to the extent, I haven't followed exactly what they're doing, but do it, independently for yourself. If you have the ability to hack, there's lists floating around of good Russian targets. Go for
it. Be educated and aware of who you're be cooperating with and working. Exactly. Think about it. But this is not the first time that the anonymous apparatus has been effectively taken over by the U.S. government. Again, it happened from 2011, summer 2011 to about 2012 March, to an extent beyond Sabu, who was one of the big leaders. There was others involved, and it's not the first time that there will be that what people think is going to happen, what they think their effects are going to be. It's not the first time people will be proven wrong and disappointed. And if I myself, who's had to spend 10 years living this, and then studying it for my memoirs and for this screenplay, and to find out why my friends are dying and being prosecuted, and Lauren Pespiza, of course, as is being under FBI prosecution right now. She's one of the ones in the signal group. One of our other colleagues, Tina Desiree Berg, was assaulted by Andy Ngo's friend, Tony Moon, live stream a few months ago at a protest. She's one of the reporters in my group the FBI was monitoring. That was broadcast all over the world. Those articles. Tony Moon never arrested. He's working with the FBI. There are reasons not to sacrifice. The most horrible people, like Tony Moon. I've watched him do so many horrific stuff. Yeah.
There's reasons not to join the FBI, Nazi, CIA, Peter Thiel alliance. And I'm happy to have spelled them out for everybody. But from this point on, that's enough explaining. I need people, those people involved. I'll send a link to this to certain people. And if I do, I'll send a little note saying, but I need those of you who were tricked and who haven't been convinced yet or don't want to be convinced. I need you to make a decision in the next few days. Because we need to stop this. It's gone too far. And if people don't know where they can leak to without getting arrested or without the information being suppressed or given to Pierre Omidyar and Peter Thiel, if they don't know, whether that be the Intercept or DDoS, if they don't know which groups are going to cover for Nazis and then attack prison whistleblowers, if they don't know which groups are going to follow the CIA's ultimate agenda or Peter Thiel's, then they really don't know what role they're playing, and they deserve to. They all deserve to. And so everyone involved deserves to know, and they will know to the extent that we're able to make it known, which, we'll see how that goes. But in the process, absolutely, there's a number of us who are very serious about this, and that needs to be understood. I'll just put it at that. Very serious about this.
At Barrett Brown on Twitter. Follow him. Make sure you're following him. And this was a good comment, too, I think someone brought up. Because I look at like Peter Thiel as someone who's making money on both sides, on every side. And this comment was, if people know who Peter Thiel is, he's, started PayPal. He was just resigned from the Facebook board. Guy's a billionaire. He runs this company that gathers all the intelligence, Palantir. If you think about it, DDO Secrets is helping Peter Thiel by doxing people indiscriminately en masse, since it adds to his surveillance industry. That's what one of the comments were. Seems pretty obvious.
Last thing I'll say. This is about Peter Thiel. this is not a billionaire in the sense that we're used to. This is not a powerful, politically connected person in the sense that we're used to. This is a new phenomenon. This is not Carnegie or Rockefeller, both vastly influential in their day. This is not Krupp. This is not the people who helped fund the Nazis. This is not IBM. This is not this is none of those things. This is a confluence of power, information, political control. I mean, both parties sought Palantir's assistance towards the 2016 election. That's not been reported because, no one listens to me, but it's in those emails, the Podesta emails. They talked about going to Alex Carr, Palantir, and asking for their help because they didn't realize, because, why would they bother thinking these things through, that Peter Thiel doesn't want to help the Democrats unless except to the extent that it serves its purpose. He wanted to help Trump because that's how you get the dark enlightenment, and that's why his people were all working for Trump. That's a lot of influence from both political parties when both presidencies are seeking your help, and one of them gets it and one of them wins. And that's not even going into the other countries where we know there's been electioneering, and I won't go into that because that's another day. Anyway, and because it won't matter anyway. I mean, basically what I say here today, a lot of it just won't matter. But Peter Thiel is a new kind of thing, and I've been saying for 10 years. Said it the moment, as soon as we became aware of him and began going through these communications and seeing what Palantir was, and I said it from prison and got put under gag order for it. And I've said it online, and I posted stuff online and get to spin it from Twitter several times for posting publicly available documents showing Palantir lied about some of its influence operations and political shenanigans. Peter Thiel is the most dangerous person in the world. He is the person who has done the most. I don't care if you're fucking Republican, Libertarian, Democrat, Green Party, unless you are in favor of the Dark Enlightenment. Go read about it. Go read Peter Thiel's essay on it. Unless you are opposed to democracy itself, as Peter Thiel openly is, and you're not interested in finding solutions that still involve the public informed consent, find out about this. Pick a side, because there's two sides. There are those who are working for Peter Thiel and to his ends, whether they know it or not. And I was on that side accidentally for a while, so you can imagine how susceptible people are. There's a lot in the press who are, and then there's those. And there's a much smaller side who know what Peter Thiel is and know he's dangerous. And there's a much smaller contingent who want to act on it. And right now we're in the information warfare aspect of that. But at some point, I hope this can be handled in the next 5-10 years, because we don't have another 10 years like this. Just think about 2010 compared to now, and think about, just extrapolate. Peter Thiel has to be stopped, and everyone involved with him needs to be stopped. And that has to be done. He is not just a Bond villain. He is not just a dictator. He's more dangerous than Putin. He's more dangerous than Trump. He's more dangerous than China itself. He's more dangerous than the U.S. government. There's nothing that is more dangerous, that has had more effect and has proven his strategic genius and his sociopathic values than that person, Peter Thiel. If he had been hanged 12 years ago, this world would be vastly different. So I'll just put it that way.
I think Rod Weber just posted, because it says Facebook user. It says Alexander Karp donated a ton of money to River Dave, our friend, almost like taunting us. That's insane.
Oh yeah, no, that's another thing that happens. That's happened, this container thing, and some of the things he's hacked supposedly. That's a whole another issue regarding some of the hacks that have happened with Cortana and so forth, and against the right. That I would just tell people, there's just anyway. I'll talk more about that in the coming days, and you can search.
I appreciate all your time tonight, Barrett. This was a great interview. Over 2 hours, 2.5 hours now. So we're going to let you go. But I guess my last question is, Peter Thiel, you think he's going to run for president?
He was born in Germany, so we can't.
Oh, can't. Okay, thank God.
He should have stayed in Germany. And I don't even know what to say. I mean, like, if my grandfather knew this, having fought, against German Nazis, who were being coddled by the West for such a long time, knew that a German-born, I'm sorry, Germany, but German-born tech billionaire who's opposed to democracy and funding people who are opposed to democracy and putting them in power, if he knew the nature of the press coverage this man was still getting, even from the outlets he doesn't have reporters he's bought, he'd turn that bomber around and probably just drop a lot of them on Manhattan. I mean, it's been way too long since the West, since most of us, since those of us in our generations have felt the sharp edges that exist in reality. People did in World War II in the 30s and 40s. And they were different kind of people because of it. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. I felt them. I've seen them. Some people around me have felt them. The black activists I work with in particular who've been screwed over by DDoS and Cortana and so forth. I've seen them. I don't want more people to see them. I want them to just accept my argument rather than just waiting another 5-10 years to see how much worse things get. We haven't even got into the ways in which the other technologies that have been found and discovered and still not discussed much in the press that are going to make it harder and harder for anyone to know what's going on, and for anyone like myself or those I work with to have any influence whatsoever. I mean, it's going to be a couple of years before, we do what people did in 1940 during the Molotov-Ribbentrop Act and just take our cyanide pills. I mean, it's going to be too late pretty soon.
Thank you so much. A lot of comments are coming in. Be safe to you. I'm worried about you. I worry about you all the time. I follow you on Twitter.
There are 7 billion people that are at risk here. I'm just the canary in the coal mine.
Thank you so much for spending time tonight. I hope we can do another show in the near future to talk about.
Thank you very much for having me on. Thank you for having me. Give me the opportunity to put all this out. I appreciate it. This is important to a lot of people, and much appreciated.
And one of your friends on here is saying, check your signals, Barrett. There's some new information about Cortana that they just sent you.
There's a lot going on still in the background. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for tonight. And again, people need to follow you big time on Twitter at Barrett Brown, at Barrett B on Twitter. Follow him.
Oh, and it's final thing. Dale Barron, Beran, of the Atlantic. You need to respond to my signal messages about Cortana and Anil Rahazer. It's been several months. You need to do it today, next few hours. Anybody out there who wants to send that message to him on Twitter, just so he gets it. It's Dale Barron at Twitter. We need to know how this happened, and we need to make it stop. And we're not going to get it by begging anyway. So thank you.
Thank you, Barrett. That is Barrett Brown. My name is Mike Crawford. This is The Young Jerks. If you're just listening to us the first time, definitely like us, subscribe, follow us. Also on podcasts, Apple, iTunes, all those places, Spotify, you'll be able to listen to it probably by tomorrow morning, if not late tonight. And like us, subscribe to us, follow us. We're going to be doing a lot more on this, hopefully, with Barrett Brown. Thank you so much, Barrett.
Thank you. Thank you.